Story 1.
I secretly filmed my wife cheating, exposed her affair to everyone, divorced her, and moved on. I came across this unexpected turn of events in the smoothest way possible. Right at the start of our yearly macho fishing weekend. Each year, me and my buddies Scott, Stan, and Roger dive into the lake for 3 days of intense fishing, while our partners head off for their own getaway. Our bond is strong, with Roger and Mary as our closest friends. Stan Fortunato, Roger's relative and the youngest among us, joined our group and became one of our top players over time. Laura and I started our journey together straight out of school. We were young and confident, and I had plenty of drive. Right after graduation, I began a small pool business, growing it into a successful venture, serving more than 100 homes with a team of 4 in just a few years. 20 years later, we're thriving, serving over 1,500 homes with a team of 30, and Stan is a crucial part of our operation in Orlando. Regardless of education or work history, Stan's energy, hard work, and great teamwork made him the leader of our Orlando branch. Impressed by his performance, I gave him a significant raise and a share in the company. Our professional relationship turned into a close friendship, making work enjoyable every day. We expanded our business from Tampa to Orlando, becoming the top pool service in Central Florida. With pools everywhere, our business flourished, bringing in money and securing our position at the top. As our business grew, I realized the importance of managing our finances wisely. I turned to Howard, a retired expert in finance and a family member, for guidance. His advice was invaluable, guiding us through challenges in the business world. With Howard's help, I expanded our business even further during a favorable mortgage rate period. I trusted Howard and his wife Beth, who provided invaluable legal advice that propelled us to success. Beth, with her intelligence and strength, suggested setting up a trust to protect our assets from legal issues. I trusted her completely with this important task. We're living the good life now, with marital happiness and our pursuit of our dream home intertwined. Laura and her friends adore our new place, which boasts a luxurious pool, a themed patio bar, and a top-notch barbecue setup. And let's not forget about the fantastic perks Laura managed to secure for us. Our neighborhood's property values are skyrocketing, making us feel like we hit the jackpot. Naturally, I agreed to all of Laura's wishes, knowing that when it's time to sell, we'll come out on top. Love can make us do things we wouldn't usually do, but in the end, it's for the best, right? Today's the day. Laura and her friends are here at our fancy house for a weekend of fun. As soon as they arrived, I was told not to bother them while they have their fun. They want to enjoy themselves without us husbands around, and I was happy to go along with it. I was excited to get away from all the girl talk and weekend small talk. With my fishing gear ready and feeling free, I left quickly. Fishing felt like paradise after weeks of working hard to manage my growing company. The idea of fishing and hanging out with my friends was amazing. I left the ladies to enjoy their wine and secrets. I couldn't help but think about how lucky I am to have Laura and her group of friends in my life. They can drive us husbands crazy sometimes, but we know deep down they make our days more interesting. With a big smile, I went to Roger's place, knowing our weekend adventure was just beginning. We had planned our lake trip carefully, aiming to leave at 6 in the evening and get to our destination by 9. The next 3 days promised exciting fishing and good times. As I was getting ready to go, I suddenly realized I forgot my special bait, which I spent a lot of time making in my workshop. Fishing isn't just a hobby for me, it's something I'm passionate about. Making my own lures and tackle fills me with pride because having the right equipment can make a big difference in catching fish. The lure I've been working on for the past week is important to me. It's something I made with care, meant to attract big fish and give me a lot of satisfaction on the water. Realizing how important it was to have the right bait, I couldn't imagine going on our trip without it. So I told my fishing buddies I needed to go back and get my bait before we left. They understood and chuckled, knowing how much I care about fishing. At 5 in the evening, I got into the car, drove the short 7-minute trip home, parked alongside the other women's cars, walked to the side door, and quietly went down to the workshop. Hoping not to disturb the ladies or get in trouble for coming back early. Being careful not to make any noise, I approached the workbench and noticed I could hear the women talking. I couldn't help but laugh, realizing they were already having a good time, as shown by their laughter and talk. They were sitting in the shade by the Hawaiian hut on the side of my house, while the workbench was right under the window, so I could catch bits of their conversation. I'm not someone who listens in on others, and their talk didn't really interest me. But when I heard my wife talking about me in bed, I got curious. For some reason, I decided to record that part of the conversation on my iPhone, thinking I'd tease her about it later. Little did I know, those next few minutes would mess up my fishing plans and turn everything upside down. Suddenly, I found myself in the middle of some juicy gossip. The ladies were really getting into it, and I couldn't help but laugh at how open they were. It seemed like they were talking about personal stuff, and it was getting intense. Amidst all the laughing, Laura didn't hold back from talking about her relationship with her husband. While I was there, I heard her bragging to the others about my abilities and how I hadn't changed over the years. It made me realize that there was Laura, proudly talking about her husband. She even mentioned how things change in a marriage over time, but said it's normal. Then, out of nowhere, one of the ladies asked a big question. I perked up, curious to see how Laura would answer. They were like detectives, trying to figure out why Laura was acting different lately. With Laura being so open, I felt like the conversation was about to get interesting. As we waited for Laura's answer, the tension and curiosity were high. Suddenly, my heart started racing, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did Laura just confess something about Stan? Our Stan? Panic hit me, and I leaned in closer, desperate to hear every word. My mind raced as I struggled to process this shocking news. Stan, whom I trusted and thought of as a friend, was somehow involved with my wife. It felt like the ground was disappearing beneath me, and I fought to control my feelings. Every word they said felt like a stab to my heart. The laughter and happiness that used to fill the air now felt like a cruel reminder of betrayal. My hands shook as I held the phone, my heart pounding in my chest, tears threatening to spill. Listening to this heartbreaking conversation, I felt like I had no power over my own life. I was overwhelmed with shock and sadness, wishing I could go back and undo those painful words. Suddenly, reality hit me hard. The trust I had in Laura and Stan was shattered, leaving me feeling abandoned and completely devastated. Their conversation made it clear my life would never be the same. The innocence and joy that once filled our home now seemed like they would be replaced by sadness and hopelessness. No, Bob and I have a great sex life, and he's always satisfied me. I love him and would never try anything with Stan on purpose. It just happened. Laura, you betrayed Bob. You can't be that happy in your marriage. No, you don't get it. My love for Bob means everything to me. He's not just my partner, he's my safe place, my peace, my heart, and my shelter. And yes, he fulfills me. I love him deeply. What happened with Stan was a mistake. But you said Stan is good in bed, suggesting closeness. We're trying to understand. Tell us the whole story, but remember, this stays between us. The guys would be furious with Stan, and my husband would kick me out if he knew. I'd never want to hurt him. He's so nice, but he'll never get it. Can I trust you to keep this between us? Although I couldn't hear their response, I figured they all agreed. Okay, let's not talk about this again. After Susan left Stan last month, he was devastated, completely shocked. He was planning to propose to her. When I saw him at the restaurant, we talked and he poured his heart out, telling me everything. Girls, he was in tears. This strong, tough man was falling apart, and it broke my heart. I felt really sorry for him, sitting beside him until he calmed down. He was so sad and upset that I felt a strong urge to comfort him, almost like a mother would. Oh, come on, Laura, you're old enough to be his mom. Don't make it sound so dramatic. You felt a physical need to comfort him, not like a mother would. Well, you're right, but at the time I wasn't thinking about being physical. Anyway, he walked me to my car, thanking me for being there for him and letting him share his feelings. I just smiled and gave him a friendly kiss. That's when things changed. Before I knew it, he silently took my hand and led me to his truck, parked nearby under a shady tree. I don't know why I went along with it. I was mesmerized. We ended up in the back of his car kissing passionately like we were teenagers. Then he admitted he always found me attractive and fantasized about being with me. I was surprised and flattered by his compliments, but what I did next, I can't explain. Honestly, in that moment, I didn't think about Bob or our family. It was like I was in a trance. I undid his belt and pulled down his pants, suddenly wanting to be intimate with him. He thanked me, saying he needed it after what he'd been through, but hearing that broke my heart. Those words hurt me deeply, touching every part of my being. I shook with pain as a sense of loss overwhelmed me. Mary, Roger's wife, spoke first. Wow, that's intense. We had no idea you were capable of that. Me neither. I never thought I'd do something like that, added Emily, Scott's wife. But it just happened. I think all of us girls dream about it, but it rarely becomes real. You handled it well. I'm jealous, she continued. So what happened next? From Laura's tone, it was clear she realized her mistake and regretted crossing a line. Well, when I came to my senses and realized what I'd done, I felt overwhelmed with guilt. I knew it was wrong, and Bob would never forgive me if he found out. I had to make sure it never happened again. I told Stan it was a one-time thing and we could never do it again. I reminded him that Bob was his friend and would feel betrayed by both of us if he knew. Stan agreed, saying it was just a moment of passion and promised to keep it a secret forever. Standing there, torn apart by shock and pain, Laura's confession echoed in my head. Mary's words dealt the final blow to my fading hope, crushing the last of my illusions. I felt completely lost and empty. So how did you end up in bed with Stan and get your husband all worked up? This question shattered me. Humiliated and confused, I wanted nothing more than to confront both Stan and my unfaithful wife head-on. Laura hesitated before telling me how Stan turned to her for comfort when he was feeling really low. But any momentary satisfaction she felt was overshadowed by the guilt of betraying me and causing so much pain. She sounded sad as she shared the details of what happened between her and Stan. No, please don't see it that way. I made another dumb mistake. I messed up and should have known better, she said in a serious tone. Stan called and asked me to lunch, but I said no because I knew we shouldn't meet alone. He said he was feeling down and just needed someone to talk to, and he felt like I was the only one who could understand. Stan offered to cook dinner if I came to his place for at least an hour. I made another huge mistake by going to his place alone. We had salads and wine and talked. After a while, he thanked me for our previous meeting, kissed me gently, and things went further. It wasn't romantic, it was just physical. I knew it was wrong, but it happened. Honestly, it was the most satisfying physical encounter I've had in years. He's been lacking for so long and is a passionate lover. It was a few hours of intense passion, but we both knew it wouldn't happen again. After I showered and got dressed, I made it clear it was a one-time thing and he shouldn't contact me. We both agreed and that was the end of it. So, you never saw him again after that? Only those 2 times? Anger surged through me and I clenched my fists tightly, trying to control the storm of emotions inside me. Laura admitting to her brief affair with Stan felt like a stab in the heart, the pain getting worse with each word she said. My world fell apart and the life I knew was gone. I was filled with rage, yet desperate to save our relationship. I couldn't bear the betrayal, but I couldn't bear to lose her either. I felt lost and vulnerable, grappling with conflicting feelings. Resentment and anger mixed with helplessness, leaving me feeling utterly confused. How could she do this? How could she betray our trust like that? Just as I searched for hope, Laura's next words hit me hard, reopening old wounds. Her casual dismissal of her actions hurt me deeply, fueling my anger and disbelief. I know it was wrong, but it just happened, she said, making it seem like her actions were out of her control. At that moment, my anger peaked. How could she brush off her actions like that? My fury grew as I listened to her downplay her betrayal. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, not just from the physical act, but from risking our marriage for momentary pleasure. The room felt like it was closing in on me as I struggled with my anger. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I knew it wouldn't help. The pain was overwhelming, weighing heavily on my chest. In that moment, I realized I couldn't deal with it all at once. So when Laura spoke again, I listened closely, hoping to find some hope for our future together. When Laura spoke, her voice trembled with emotion. She admitted that despite feeling guilty, she couldn't shake the memories of the intense passion she shared with Stan. These memories became a secret refuge for her, emerging during intimate moments with me. No, never again. All I have now are beautiful memories. It's hard to say, but I use them when Bob and I are intimate. I know it's wrong, but I can't forget them, now that they're all I have left. It was a heartbreaking confession. Laura's words carried a tone of sadness as she struggled with the realization that these memories of Stan would always stay with her, despite her efforts to erase them. Emily stayed quiet, but after Laura's confession, she spoke up. Laura, I envy you so much. I love Scott, but I've often wondered what it would be like to be intimate with someone else. I don't mean to offend, but Scott is kind of small. I love him, but I'm curious to try something different just once. Mary let out a soft sigh, seeming moved by the story. My goodness, and poor Bob remains clueless, unaware of Stan or your fantasies during intimacy. This is shocking, Laura, but you need to get your act together and forget about Stan. Bob deserves better, and I'll make sure he's taken care of. Trust me, he'll never find out, and I won't let this happen again, I promise. It was a mistake, and the guilt weighs heavily on me. Sharing the whole ordeal with someone brought some relief, along with the wine. Now my future hung in the balance as the women chatted about me. I felt like a fool who had funded my wife's lavish lifestyle without realizing it. The spa days, country club memberships, shopping sprees, and luxurious home, all paid for by me, a mug known as a naive husband. Laura's confession left me in disbelief, tears flowing down my face, revealing the depth of my pain. Time seemed to blur as I listened, unable to pull myself away from the painful truth. I realized I needed to step back from the situation, at least for a while. With a heavy heart, I grabbed my fishing bait and the bottle of cherry liqueur I had bought for the guys, and headed back to Roger's house. The guys were waiting for me. Despite the turmoil inside me, tears continued to fall as I drove, my mind filled with confusion and resentment. I needed time to process it all, to come to terms with the betrayal I had just discovered. I wasn't ready to confront Laura about what I had learned. The pain was too much, too overwhelming. I wanted to stick to my original plan, to get away for the weekend and find solace in solitude. But fate seemed to mock me when I realized I'd be spending those days with Stan, the one involved in the heartbreaking affair. The thought of being near him only added to my pain. I didn't know what to expect, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on me. Could I control my emotions? Could I face him without crumbling under the devastation inside me? As I drove back to Roger's house, tears continued to flow, and a deep sense of loss and pain engulfed me. The upcoming weekend felt like a dark cloud hanging over me, and I didn't know how to cope. All I knew was that I needed time to recover, to fix the broken pieces of my heart. At that moment, I felt completely alone, let down by someone I cared about and trusted. The sadness overwhelmed me, and I prayed for the strength to mend my wounded soul someday. When I got there, Roger was outside loading his Escalade. When I got closer, he noticed something wasn't right. Seeing the blank look in my eyes, I wasn't ready to talk about it, but when he asked what was wrong, I managed to come up with a believable excuse. "Bob, what's the matter? You look terrible. Is everything okay?" "Sorry, Roger, just dealing with a bad headache. I need some time to relax." "Are you sure? You seem really off." "Yes, I'll be fine. Just let me sit in the front. I'll close my eyes and I'm sure I'll feel better. Plus, I wouldn't miss our yearly trip for anything. I need the break." "Sure, no problem. Why don't you go inside and unwind while we finish up? We'll leave in about 30 minutes. I'll come get you when we're ready." True to his word, 30 minutes later I found myself in the front seat with Roger keeping an eye on me. He gave me his wife's sleep mask and a pair of noise-canceling headphones. As I settled in the passenger seat with Stan and Scott in the back, with the blindfold and headphones on, I was surrounded by darkness, limiting my senses to smell, touch, and taste, which helped me process the unexpected situation. The guys respected my need for space and offered help if I needed it. Unable to face Stan, I kept my eyes shut and thanked them for understanding. For the next 3 hours, in the darkness, I sat quietly, thinking about the disaster I had just witnessed, remembering our years together, how much I loved Laura, and how grateful I felt for our children, Michael and Katie. She said it was a one-time mistake, that she regretted it and promised never to do it again. Forgiving and forgetting was hard for me, but her lingering thoughts about Stan haunted me, especially during intimate moments. Sadly, I think this confession marks the end of our marriage. I wondered how the cherished memories of our family could fade away. Tears clouded my vision, but I wiped them away before anyone noticed. For the first time, I felt confused and conflicted, without answers or guidance. I was lost and unsure. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I remember is Roger shaking my shoulder, waking me up. "Dude, are you okay? How are you feeling?" he asked, already near the fishing hut. I remained unusually quiet for the next 2 days, blaming my headache. The guys respected my need for space as I tried not to spoil Scott and Roger's trip. During this time, I wrestled with my feelings, thinking about my life, both past and future. Although difficult, I was determined to endure. 2 days later, still struggling with uncertainty, I found myself walking along the trail toward the lake, accompanied only by Stan. Roger and Scott were supposed to meet us at the boat dock. I followed behind Stan as we made our way through the woods. As we moved along the path, Laura's words echoed in my mind, and suddenly, I was overwhelmed by anger. I noticed a sizable fallen branch beside the path, roughly the size of a baseball bat. Acting on impulse, I grabbed it, feeling its weight in my hands. Looking at Stan, who was about 20 paces ahead of me, I impulsively lunged forward, lifted the heavy branch, and brought it down onto Stan's right shoulder. Originally aiming for his head, I changed my target at the last moment, hitting his collarbone instead, causing him intense pain as he fell to the ground. Standing over him, I looked down at the man who had been involved with my wife. He held his injured shoulder as I yelled, "This is for you, for being with my wife." Then I delivered a strong kick between his legs. I hit him with all my strength, watching him writhe in pain until he passed out. After a few moments, I regained my composure, carrying Stan to a nearby tree and propping him up until he regained consciousness. When he woke up, he muttered, "What the hell?" I interrupted angrily, "Shut up. You were with her, that's it. Don't talk to me for the rest of the trip, and don't say anything to Laura about this. If you do, you'll regret it." I don't know what I'll do with her, but I don't need you to ruin it further. You've ruined my 20-year marriage. Don't ruin my revenge. Bob, she loves you. You can't leave her. It's all my fault, and I'm truly sorry. Please blame me, not her. Bob, when Susan left me, Laura was there for me. It just happened, and she felt guilty afterward. Dude, don't leave her. She loves you. I hit him again. I told you to shut up. At that moment, Roger and Scott saw me delivering another blow, and they rushed over to pull me away. Bob, what's happening? What happened? Roger helped me up, and we headed back to the cabin. For the next hour, Stan nursed his injured shoulder, expressing anger at my surprise attack and calling the fight unfair. I glared at him and told him to be quiet. Then I played the recording for everyone to hear. After the recording ended, Roger expressed his anger at his nephew. You're a damn fool. You betrayed our friend, the man who gave you a job when you were down and out and trusted you. You had an affair with one of our wives and had the nerve to come on this trip with us, and you're still upset that Bob hurt you? You should be grateful we didn't throw you into the lake. We don't want to see or hear from you for the rest of this trip. Not a word. Consider yourself lucky to be alive, Roger exclaimed. Scott added, Guys, there's another issue with this recording. You heard what my wife and Mary said, how interested they were in it all. Our wives seem okay with Laura's cheating and are keeping it quiet. I don't know about you, but I have a problem with that. When I get back, Emily and I are going to have a serious conversation. Yeah, you're right, Scott. It's disrespectful to all of us. He turned to Stan, glaring at him, and remarked, Look at the mess you've made, idiot. You ruined one marriage and possibly two more. Maybe we should leave you stranded in the middle of the lake. Stan simply hung his head, remaining silent, realizing the seriousness of what happened. I spoke up. Guys, I agree they're all involved, but please give me a few days before we do anything. I'll share the recording with you, but I need to talk to Laura first before she finds out I know everything because of this idiot. I don't think I can stay with her. Every time we're intimate, I'll know she's thinking about him. Knowing that, I can't keep our marriage going. I'll probably file for divorce. I just need a few days to figure everything out. Roger fixed a stern look at his nephew. Stan, you're awful. You won't say a word to Laura or the other wives unless we say so. If you even hint to Laura about what's coming, we'll make your life miserable. And if you disappear, none of us will care. You're family, but that's the only reason I didn't leave you out in the woods. You disrespected our friend, a good man, just because you couldn't handle your own relationship. You went and got involved with someone else's wife. You're garbage, and it's shameful to say you're my sister's child. Not a word, got it? Stan nodded silently in agreement. During the trip, nobody spoke to him, and to his credit, he kept to himself, avoiding any trouble. Now the only thing left was what to do about Laura. On the way home, I thought about the situation, considering how Laura might react if our roles were reversed. Then I had an idea. I had a plan. Despite my anger, I still cared for Laura deep down, and I might be able to forgive a one-time mistake with Stan. But the thought of her fantasizing about it while being intimate with me was unbearable. So I decided to let Laura decide her own fate. My plan was to bring up infidelity, suggesting that I was having an affair myself, and see how she reacted and what she did afterward. If she could forgive one mistake, then I could too, for her sake, and we could move forward. Whatever her response, that's how I would feel about her and our marriage. The solution to her mistake would be up to her. Arriving home and pulling into the driveway, my anger churned just below the surface. Despite feeling gloomy, it was time to confront Laura, and I had to push my emotions aside and act as if everything was normal, a difficult task. Stepping into the house, Laura greeted me warmly, looking sharp, and hugged and kissed me, a gesture I knew I would miss if things went south. Although I was still angry, I couldn't ignore my lingering affection for the woman who betrayed me. Thoughts of her betrayal fueled my anger, but the smell of her perfume and the delicious dinner she made helped calm me down. We had a nice meal, during which I kept my composure while she talked about the past few days. It was still early when she led me to the bedroom, expressing her desire for affection and closeness. Despite her obvious desire for intimacy, I couldn't bring myself to fully engage. As she eagerly undressed and pulled me towards her on the bed, I hesitated for the first time in our relationship. Laura looked at me in confusion, wondering what had gone wrong. Putting my phone on the nightstand, I started recording audio to ensure there would be no misunderstandings during our conversation. Laura, I need to confess something important. There's someone else and it's been bothering me inside. I can't keep it to myself any longer, I said seriously. Startled, she looked at me and asked, What do you mean, someone else? I'm truly sorry. It only happened a few times, but the passion was so intense that I can't forget it, I admitted. Her fiery temper flared up just as I expected. "You're terrible. You had intimacy with someone else and now you can't stop thinking about it?" she accused. "Baby, it was only physical. I still love you," I assured her, careful not to reveal the full extent of my betrayal. "I can't believe this. What do you mean you can't stop thinking about it?" she pressed. "Well, honestly, it was the most incredible experience of my life and I can't seem to shake it," I replied cautiously, echoing her own words from the recording. Her tears started flowing, clearly hurt by the idea of betrayal. Was I harsh and rude? Maybe, but the truth is I'm the one who's been wronged, not her. I'll let her have her say, I thought to myself. Suddenly she exploded in anger, yelling, "Forget you! Pack your bags and leave. I won't stay married to a cheater, got it? My father cheated on my mother, leaving her broken. I won't let you do that to me. Go now. I'll divorce you and make you pay for it." As she berated me, listing all she had done for our family, I almost chuckled at her reaction. She wouldn't be so confident in a few moments, that was for sure. "Laura, it was just a physical encounter, only twice. Come on, it was just once. Are you really thinking about divorce over this? Think about it. It was just physical intimacy. Are you serious? I can't trust you, and yes, I want a divorce and you'll pay a hefty price. You do know our state recently passed a law favoring the victim of infidelity, right? I'll use this law to divorce you and take everything you own. I might even take your business and leave you as one of the guys at the pool. I never thought you could be so cold and heartless." As I've said, there was no emotional connection, just physical closeness. Is this really what you want? Are you sure reconciliation is out of the question? Maybe we could try counseling. I tried to save our marriage, but it seems you've decided to end it without realizing it. No, it's over between us. I won't be married to a cheater. Just pack your things and go. Stay with someone or get a hotel room, but I don't want to see you anymore. You'll hear from my lawyer. I couldn't help but smile. She unknowingly made her decision with malice in her voice. She demanded, "Why are you smiling like that?" "Well, honey, you've just made my choice easier," I replied. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Let me show you something. Get dressed and come with me," I instructed. Though still angry, she reluctantly followed me to the workshop. I positioned her by the window where I had made the recording, instructing her to stay there. I stepped outside, connected my Bluetooth speakers to my iPhone, and returned. Despite her anger, confusion washed over her face as I pressed play on my phone. My wife's confusion deepened upon hearing her own voice, yet she remained attentive. Her expression then shifted to shock as she absorbed the entire conversation. Tears streamed down her face as she collapsed to her knees, the weight of realization hitting her hard. "Darling, I'm so sorry. How did you hear that?" she asked, her tears flowing. "Well, it's not really important, but I had to return for something I forgot. I didn't want to interrupt your gathering, so I slipped in through the back door to avoid disturbing your little party. That's when I overheard your conversation about me in bed. I wrote it down, intending to share and tease you later. But when you confessed to your affair with Stan, I stayed and transcribed everything," I explained. "Sweetheart, you heard me say it was just a one-time thing, just physical involvement. You must understand there's nothing between. I need your forgiveness. I'm truly sorry, but you weren't meant to find out." Amidst our tears and anguish, Laura's words of remorse broke through the pain. Her voice trembled with genuine sorrow and regret as she begged for forgiveness, exposing her vulnerability. Her plea touched my heart, revealing the depth of our love buried beneath the hurt and anger. However, I couldn't give in to her tears and pleas. My tone turned cold and distant as I revealed the painful truth to Laura. The resentment ran deep, and I couldn't shake the sense of betrayal that consumed me. Her confession about fantasizing about Stan during our intimate moments shattered the remaining trust between us. "I heard it all, Laura," I replied, the warmth vanishing from my voice. "You're right, but you forgot to mention that you confessed to dreaming about him while we were together. How can I just overlook that?" For the first time in our marriage, her tears didn't move me, yet her words pierced my heart deeply. The thought of her fantasizing about another man while I poured my love into our relationship was unbearable. "I can't ignore this, Laura," I continued, bitterness in my words. "And I can't ignore that you were never going to tell me and kept me in the dark. You've broken something inside me, and I don't know if I can trust you again. How can I believe in your love if you're dreaming of someone else?" I burned with anger, feeling like I deserved better. The thought of being with someone who couldn't fully commit was crushing. "I can't just act like everything's okay," I said firmly. "Thinking about another man while we're together is enough for me to consider separating. I don't know how to love you again, knowing you're thinking of him instead of me during our intimate moments." The pain in my heart was unbearable, and fixing our relationship felt hopeless. I couldn't forgive her for hurting me so deeply. Silence filled the room after my words hung heavily. There was nothing more to say. The truth had been spoken, and the pain was too deep to ignore. It was clear that the damage done was beyond repair, and I couldn't see a way to forgive. In that moment, I realized our love was shattered forever, and the future we once imagined was now just a distant memory. Though it hurt, I had to accept this truth if I wanted to heal and move forward, even if it meant doing it without her. No, that's not what I meant. You don't understand. I love you and don't want him, I pleaded with Laura, hoping she'd understand the pain she caused. Bob, you need to let me explain everything. Don't give up on me, Laura responded desperately. As I confronted her, anguish and betrayal laced my words. I heard what you said on that recording, and the thought of him in our bed is too much for me. I never thought you'd betray my love and hurt me like this. If I'm wrong, look me in the eye and tell me it's not true. Look at me and say you weren't thinking of him when we were intimate. But she couldn't meet my gaze, and the truth hung heavy in the air. Yes, you can't even look at me, I sighed, feeling defeated. You've destroyed everything, Laura, I muttered, feeling crushed by her betrayal. Once I divorce you, you can be with him, and then you won't have to dream about him anymore. Tears rolled down her face as Laura barely whispered, You can't leave me. I love you. Please let me fix this. But the wounds were too deep, the trust too broken to repair. This is ironic. Now you want my forgiveness? Or how surprising. I'll fix everything. I love you. I'm sorry. I echoed her words bitterly, struggling to understand how everything fell apart so quickly. What makes you think I'll stay with you after what you did? Do I look like someone who would forgive his cheating wife's betrayal? I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and sadness. Laura's betrayal deeply wounded me, leaving me exposed and fragile. As I spoke to Laura, my voice shook with a mix of feelings. I've been in turmoil for the past 3 days. Part of me wanted to forgive you and repair our relationship. I thought I could move past this one-time mistake, but everything changed when I heard what you told your friends. Every word felt like a stab in my heart, painfully reminding me of the love I had lost. The ache in my heart was real, impossible to hide in my voice. Hearing her casually discuss intimate details of her thoughts during our moments together shattered the last shreds of trust I had. Tears welled up in my eyes as I struggled to comprehend how quickly everything fell apart. Throughout our marriage, I never cried openly, but now I couldn't contain my pain. I felt completely embarrassed as I spoke, the weight of my emotions threatening to engulf me. Laura, I continued, tears streaming down my face and my voice shaking, these women, your friends, now see me as an oblivious husband. It feels like living a lie, not knowing what was going on behind my back. Knowing they were mocking me and labeling me as ignorant shattered whatever self-respect I had left. The ensuing silence was heavy, each moment filled with our emotions. The future felt uncertain, and I didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. I couldn't endure a marriage tainted by betrayal and doubt. As reality sank in, I knew a decision had to be made. Since I couldn't decide our future, I came up with a plan. I'll reveal the details of the affair, and how we move forward will depend on your reaction. The brilliance of my plan was that the fate of our marriage rested entirely on you. However, even as I outlined my strategy, the sense of betrayal hung in the air. But now, this is what you can expect from me. I won't kick you out like you did to me, but you'll move to the guest room because I can't share our bed with you. I'll consult with a lawyer and pursue charges of infidelity. I'm eager to use that new divorce law you've been so eager to share, fueled by all your anger. As Laura begged for forgiveness, the weight of our 2 decades together weighed heavily on me. What about our 20 years and our kids, I asked, my voice thick with emotion. The pain of betrayal was immense, and I felt keenly the impact of her actions on our entire family. I know it won't be easy, I said, my voice trembling with resentment and anger. But I can't overlook what you've done, Laura. You didn't consider our children or our years of commitment when you chose to betray me and our family. Her betrayal deeply wounded me, creating an intense pain in my heart. The trust we had was shattered, and I was unsure how to move forward. What you did is unforgivable, I stated firmly, and you'll face the consequences, just as you were ready to hold me accountable for my mistakes. Now, gather your things from our bedroom. With a heavy heart, I led her away, separating her physically from the space that once symbolized our love. The room where we shared precious moments now carried the stain of betrayal. That night, I couldn't find comfort in sleep, mourning the end of our marriage. I loved her deeply, but knowing she fantasized about another man during our most intimate moments weighed heavily on me. Some men can forgive such indiscretions, but I couldn't find the strength to do so. The pain was too much, and the trust was shattered. Despite my love for her, her words were an insurmountable barrier. Our dream of a future together was shattered, leaving an unfillable void. I had to honor my own feelings, even if it meant letting go of the woman I cherished. Before she left, I looked at the woman I had loved for 20 years and said, "You've broken my heart. Today I've lost someone who didn't appreciate me, but today you've lost someone who was willing to do anything for you." The echo of her pleas for forgiveness stayed with me as I said goodbye to Laura for the last time. Bob faced the heartbreaking task of telling his children, dreading the moment when he would share the devastating news. His son, Michael, offered understanding and unwavering support, providing some comfort amid the turmoil. However, Katie's reaction crushed his hopes, her anger reflecting her close bond with her mother, which hurt him deeply. Bob tried hard to mend their relationship, but it felt impossible. In a rare show of strength, Laura took the initiative to talk to Katie, admitting her mistake and urging her not to blame her father, who had done nothing wrong. The children's lives were changed forever, but Bob remained determined to secure their future, promising to fund their college education and provide for them. The confrontation between the couples was filled with betrayal and sadness. Mary felt her heart break when she heard about Laura's divorce, sensing their long friendship falling apart. Roger was furious, confused by his wife keeping quiet about her friend's affair and even seeming to support it. The revelation from the tape was devastating, making him question everything. The hurt was too deep to ignore, and it seemed like their strong bond was broken beyond repair. The following days were full of strong emotions and sadness as they faced the consequences of their actions. The close group of friends now struggled with the painful reality of betrayal and lost trust. Mary, devastated by Laura's divorce, confronted her husband, Roger, realizing her role in hiding the affair. She felt awful as she understood the impact of her actions. Roger, furious, demanded answers about why she covered up for Laura and hurt their closest friend, leaving her speechless and full of regret. A similar scene played out at Scott's house when Emily heard incriminating words about her husband on the tape. Overwhelmed with shame, Scott decided to leave, leaving Emily in tears and regret. Meanwhile, tension grew in Bob and Laura's home as Bob served divorce papers. Despite Laura's apologies and understanding of her mistake, Bob remained silent. His pain was deep, knowing that reconciliation was impossible due to the immense hurt and broken trust. Their case went to Judge Mantour, making the divorce process tough as Laura tried desperately to save her marriage. During the trial, Stan confessed his guilt for the damage he caused. He was warned to tell the truth or face the consequences. His testimony sounded more like an admission of guilt and an apology to those affected. Tears filled the courtroom as the final chapter of the marriage unfolded. Laura felt her heart sink as she listened to the affair on the recording. The judge's decision was quick. Bob received a large part of their assets, and Laura was denied spousal support according to the new laws. Laura painfully accepted that her actions led to the end of her marriage. Her once exciting relationship with Stan now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the pain and regret she caused Bob. Their future, once bright, now lay in ruins, burdened by her betrayal. Faced with the harsh truth, Laura realized she not only lost her marriage but also her sense of security and the life she cherished. The aftermath of their choices changed the lives of these friends forever, leaving behind sadness, regret, and broken trust as they faced their past mistakes. Bob, ever the practical man, offered Laura a place to stay in their guest room, aiming to help her get back on her feet. The large house made it easier for them to live together without too much tension. Bob threw himself into work to keep his mind busy, often coming home late to avoid running into Laura. Despite Laura's efforts to reconcile with Bob, he remained firm in his decision to keep his distance. Bob began dating Becky, his secretary, who happily brought joy to his life. Despite their age difference, Becky admired Bob and was committed to him. She couldn't understand Laura's actions but felt fortunate to be with Bob. Becky was determined to show Bob her loyalty and love. The weight of the past few months took a toll on Laura. Seeing Becky move in and take her place in Bob's life was a constant reminder of what she had lost. Watching Bob and Becky together hurt Laura deeply. Each moment between them felt like a stab in the heart. Jealousy consumed her, and she regretted her choices that led to this situation. Their once happy home now filled Laura with sorrow as she watched Bob and Becky grow closer. The bed she once shared with Bob now belonged to him and Becky, adding to Laura's pain as she faced the consequences of her decisions. Feeling alone and scared, Laura struggled to cope with her situation. She had no job prospects and feared a future without Bob. Adding to her distress, she knew she had to confront her reality and rebuild her life, even though it seemed daunting. Despite the challenges ahead, Laura held on to hope that she could find peace and happiness again, even if it meant letting go of her dreams with Bob. Meanwhile, at Bob's workplace, Stan's role in Bob's divorce caused him to be ostracized by his CO workers. He felt like an outcast, which affected his work performance, leading to complaints and financial losses. Realizing he couldn't stay, Stan decided to leave and took a brave step by starting his own business. He quickly gained many clients. However, Bob's legal team pointed out that Stan had broken a non-compete agreement they had. Despite not fully understanding the legal details, Stan continued to grow his business. Bob's lawyer advised patience, suggesting they wait to gather evidence. Within 10 months, Stan built up over 100 clients, showing impressive growth in his business. At first, Stan enjoyed his success, but it didn't last long. He faced a lawsuit demanding $1 million settlement, accusing him of causing financial harm and breaking the non-compete agreement. In the midst of the legal trouble, Bob, still hurt by Stan's actions, sought revenge. He didn't just want money. He wanted Stan to pay for his part in Bob's marriage falling apart and for losing loyal clients. After the legal battle ended, Stan suffered severe consequences. Bob won the case and took over Stan's thriving business, pushing Stan into bankruptcy. The career Stan worked hard to build, and the chance of owning part of Bob's multi-million-dollar business, vanished. Stan was left broke and emotionally wounded. Without formal education, he had to resort to tough manual labor to get by. The harsh results of his actions taught Stan a lesson he'd never forget: not to interfere in someone else's marriage and not to betray trust. Scott and Roger's wives also realized the danger they narrowly avoided by learning from Laura's mistake. This made them rethink their relationships and commit to rebuilding trust and communication. Over time, they strengthened their marriages, rediscovering love and forgiveness. Though they distanced themselves from Laura and Bob, they held on to memories of their past friendship. Laura's life turned grim as she dealt with the aftermath of her failed marriage. Working as a dental office receptionist gave her some stability, but it couldn't replace the happiness she once had with Bob. Living in a modest apartment, she felt the weight of loneliness and regret every day. Trying her best to move on, she started a new relationship with an older man from work, which provided some comfort. But it didn't compare to the love she lost with Bob. The joy she used to feel now felt like a distant memory. Her past mistakes haunted her constantly, a reminder she couldn't shake off. In quiet moments, she wondered what could have been, wishing she had made different choices to save her life with Bob. However, she had to accept that she had let go of something special and irreplaceable. The bright future she once envisioned now seemed overshadowed by darkness. A deep sadness and longing for what she lost consumed her. While Bob missed Laura greatly, his void was filled by Becky, who made it her mission to be the perfect partner. Bob was attracted to her youthful energy and enthusiasm, and they got married a year later. Eventually, Michael and Katie welcomed a half-brother into the family a year after that.
Story 2.
My name is Sal, short for Salvatore, and I'm from Italy. My parents moved to the United Kingdom in the late 1960s. We had a popular Italian restaurant that not only supported my immediate family, but also extended to distant relatives, including many cousins. Though we're not always in each other's pockets, we're a close-knit family. We make an effort to gather for family events to avoid our beloved grandmother's disapproving gaze. She's the matriarch of our clan. 7 years ago, Connie, who always insisted on obedience, became my wife. We both decided to marry around the age of 30 after being in a relationship without a clear direction. Although it was satisfying in some ways, it lacked the elements needed for a long-term commitment. For almost 2 years, we enjoyed each other's company, attended parties, and had a great time before deciding to exchange vows. Unfortunately, my grandmother never fully accepted Connie, maintaining a tolerant attitude towards her. She was never openly rude, but there was always a look of disbelief in her eyes, as if she expected Connie to make a mistake. Where women get such intuition is a mystery to me. My grandmother had a tough time hiding her emotions from my wife, even though she never expressed her opinions in front of others. Just before our marriage, my grandmother warned me to keep an eye on Connie, expressing concerns about something bothering her. These words continued to echo in my head for unknown reasons. About a month ago, I discovered that my wife was secretly dating another man. They met regularly for at least 6 months, and I found out after a thorough investigation. Surprisingly, finding the truth wasn't as difficult as I expected. One evening, a small oversight on her part raised suspicions. It all started with a minor detail: a pen. A cheap, ordinary pen, usually given as a hotel souvenir. Its sudden appearance puzzled me, because I couldn't recall staying at the hotel from where she got it. I usually prefer well-known hotel chains about once a month, although I'm accumulating loyalty points, but they're not that great. One evening, while walking with Connie, I needed a pen. She rummaged in her big purse and pulled one out for me. However, after finishing writing, I noticed an inscription on the handle that caused a small alarm. I knew I hadn't stayed at the hotel, indicated on the pen, leading to my confusion. Without saying a word, I handed the pen back to Connie. Although seemingly insignificant, this small crack in our marriage could lead to significant consequences. Strangely, I chose to push it aside as we were meeting friends for a delightful evening over dinner, drinks, and dancing with 2 other couples. We found ourselves in the cozy lounge bar of our favorite restaurant just when the infamous pen made its significant move. It was a place where we always felt comfortable and could enjoy a relaxed atmosphere. Additionally, the restaurant owner was one of my cousins, allowing us a generous family discount. We reciprocated by expressing our support for the establishment. The discounts helped us strike the perfect balance between gratitude and not undermining the owner's authority, a mutually beneficial arrangement that worked harmoniously. The other couples present that evening were Carlo and his wife Joanna, as well as Phil and Terry. Carlo and Joanna were a bit older than us, about 5 years. Despite our distant relationship, we still considered ourselves a family. Carlo had somewhat old-fashioned behavior, and his life was quite interesting, although not entirely within the law. Despite his formidable personality, underneath the intimidating exterior was an incredibly kind and gentle person. You couldn't find a better person unless you managed to upset him. Just one piece of advice: don't. Carlo was like an older brother to me, always ready to support and be a reliable companion who knew how to keep me out of trouble. His wife Joanna was a charming woman who shared a deep love with Carlo, making them an ideal couple. She was not only beautiful, but also the only person who could intimidate Carlo, although he openly adored her without any doubt. I was fortunate to get to know Phil through work, and we immediately found a common language. We were the same age and had similar views on life. Sometimes we played golf together, and our friendship went beyond the golf course. Phil's wife Terry joined us during chats at the golf club, and everything seemed to be going well. It was noticeable that Terry and Connie got along well. Often they spent days on excessive shopping trips, buying everything in a row and spending what felt like an eternity on it. All I saw were the huge bags that Connie brought home after such outings. While Phil was consistently warm and friendly, Terry sometimes seemed distant, especially lately. But there came a moment when she suddenly joined the team completely. I often suspected something was wrong with her and repeatedly told Connie about it. However, she brushed it off, resorting to the typical excuses about women's problems when a woman doesn't want to share something. While we were in a comfortable area enjoying cocktails, Carlo and Joanna entered. I stood up to warmly greet them with hugs and kisses. A prompt waiter quickly brought new drinks to our table. Connie was always amazed at how well we were treated wherever we went, considering the 6 of us. My cousin efficiently directed us to our reserved table, our usual spot with both privacy and a view of the entrance. Carlo always preferred this window view, and although curious, we didn't ask why. Joanna inquired about Phil and Terry, mentioning she had talked to Connie earlier and knew they might be a bit late since Phil was not home yet. Observing the interaction between the 2 women, Carlo gave me a significant look. I met his gaze, but he subtly shook his head. Choosing to leave things as they were, I mentally noted to discuss this with Carlo later. After finishing our first drinks, Phil and Terry finally arrived, looking a bit flushed. Carlo watched them with an unfathomable expression. I noticed the familiar look again and wondered what Carlo knew. Something important was definitely happening. As we settled into our seats, we quickly delved into discussions about work, upcoming plans, and the usual talk about our families and children. After a delightful meal, we returned to the lounge area with music playing. At this point, the girls were eager to hit the dance floor. The 3 of us guys sat for a while, realizing our duty was to accompany them. Carlo took the lead and escorted Joanna back to our table after the first song. Glancing around, I noticed Phil and Terry still on the dance floor, but there was an awkwardness between them. I quietly asked Connie if they were okay. She replied, "I think so." Terry didn't talk about anything. A second look at her made me realize something was definitely wrong. Phil and Terry joined us at the table, but Terry quickly excused herself, saying she needed to go to the restroom. Carlo casually asked Phil if everything was all right. Phil calmly replied, "Yes, it's fine, just maybe a little too much." He signaled to pour more, and the waiter brought a new round of drinks before the women returned. The nonverbal signals revealed true feelings. Connie's gaze conveyed anxiety, and Carlo subtly nudged me, hinting at hidden knowledge. He winked, confirming he knew something important. To ease the tension, we continued changing partners for a few more dances, but as we prepared to leave, I noticed Connie talking to Phil at the other end of the hall. This extra detail of the evening didn't escape my notice. I thought about asking her later but changed my mind. After saying goodbye, we took separate taxis. Curiosity got the better of me and I couldn't resist asking about Phil and Terry the next day. "What happened to them?" I asked directly. She reassured me everything was fine, but as she looked out the window, I felt something was wrong. Not understanding what exactly was the matter, I decided to contact Carlo the next morning. That night, Connie tried to reassure me with closeness, reminding me of her love. However, an odd feeling persisted. Something was amiss, but I couldn't pinpoint it. "Darling, always remember that I love you too. You are my wife, and no one will ever separate us. I will never give you a reason to doubt it." Hugging her tightly, I showered her face with kisses, and we fell asleep. Yet the unusual events of that evening lingered in my mind. Realizing I needed to contact Carlo first thing in the morning, Connie went to the gym early the next day. Aimlessly wandering around, I drank refreshing orange juice, attempting to clear my clouded mind. Sitting at my laptop, I began searching for the hotel engraved on the pen handle in Connie's purse. After a thorough Google search, I discovered its location, conveniently close, but on the other side of London. I noted down contact details, and my skepticism led me to study the hotel's history for potential clues. Unfortunately, my investigation yielded nothing significant. I was ready to leave. I called Carlo, expressing my concern about Phil and Terry. The unease in my voice must have been apparent as I asked, "What's up with Phil and Terry? Should I be worried?" Carlo suggested meeting at his brother's bar at noon to discuss it face to face, urging me to come alone. Assuring him, I agreed, and the call ended, leaving me with a growing sense of anxiety. As the day unfolded, I shared my plans with Connie, assuring her it wouldn't take long. Her curiosity led her to inquire, "What does he want to say, Sal?" The concern in her eyes mirrored the growing unease I felt. A sense of foreboding accompanied me as I drove to Carlo's house. Carlo greeted me, and without words, gestured for me to follow him. We navigated through the bar, entering utility rooms until we reached a secluded office-like space. As we sat on opposite sides of a large oak table, Carlo's solemnity was palpable. He began, "I promised your father I'd always protect you, and I intend to keep that promise. But what I'm about to tell you will be hard to hear." The pain in his eyes heightened my apprehension, and my thoughts raced, anticipating the revelation's gravity. Carlo handed me a large manila envelope, emphasizing the weight of the moment. "Sal, remember I'm here for you, okay?" The deliberate movements and the suffering in his gaze hinted at the seriousness of what lay inside. Opening the envelope, glossy photos unfolded, revealing my wife in different poses with another man in a shabby hotel room. Shocked, I could hardly process the sight before me. Carlo's voice broke through my awareness haze as my marriage unraveled before my eyes. Tears streamed down my face and I locked eyes with Carlo, desperate for answers. "How? When? Who is he?" The torrent of emotions, shock, fear, and anger, swirled within me, and I clung to Carlo's promise of support in the midst of this unexpected storm. Carlo stammered, his voice trembling as he informed me about Connie's suspicious actions. He had heard rumors a few weeks ago, but only gathered concrete evidence recently. Before our recent date, he discovered some unsettling details. According to him, Connie was spotted in a restaurant in South London with a man who seemed overly friendly. The familiarity between them suggested a connection to Tony Drew, Phil's brother. Recalling our night walk, Carlo pointed out the exchanged glances between Phil, Connie, and Terry, which now made sense. Confirming my suspicions, He mentioned seeing Connie's pen from a hotel in London. I inquired if it had happened there, and Carlo nodded in agreement. Expressing my determination, I told Carlo that my assistant had been monitoring their actions since the beginning of the previous week. I wanted to confront the man face to face, but Carlo cautioned against rash actions that could lead to serious consequences. He advised divorcing Connie and leaving him to handle the situation. Rejecting his suggestion, I insisted on handling it personally and wanted information on the man's residence, workplace, and other details. Carlo acknowledged having the information in the envelope, but stressed the importance of careful planning to avoid legal consequences. He proposed a strategic approach to eliminate any possibility of ending up in prison and asked for my agreement on the plan. It seems the person in question is currently single but has been through a divorce. Even though he doesn't have kids, he seems to prefer women, especially those who are already married. Maybe he's not into commitments. What are your thoughts on this? How well do you get along with your friend Phil? I'm asking because he behaved oddly at the restaurant where Terry and your wife were. I've been keeping a close eye on him and suspect he might be aware of what's happening. If that's true, can we still consider him a friend? I noticed that too, and I'm starting to suspect his wife is involved in this. Judging by their behavior, I see no reason to continue being around them more than necessary. Sal, I think we should end this as soon as possible. If this was an isolated incident, I might not have paid attention, but after seeing it, I can't forget about it. It's all too overwhelming. Every time I see her, these images will haunt me. No, I can't forgive or forget. I understand. But in the current situation, you should prioritize your own protection. Taking the time to plan ahead will be helpful, even if it requires some patience. Trust me, you're going to need retribution. I informed Carlo that I needed time to carefully consider the situation, expressing my desire for both Phil and Connie to suffer. Leaning in, Carlo placed a business card in front of me, explaining that it belonged to an experienced specialist who was already informed about my situation. He encouraged me to call the specialist and convey what needed to be done, assuring me that he was also our cousin. Carlo chuckled at the connection between the specialist and our family. We had cousins everywhere, and I couldn't help but chuckle. We continued to discuss our plan for another hour until we decided on a course of action. I dialed Cousin Carl's number. We agreed to postpone its execution until all preparations are completed. Meanwhile, I had to find out the extent of Phil and his wife Terry's involvement in this situation. Leaving Carlo behind, I drove slowly back home. After parking the car, I went to the door, but there was no sound inside. Connie was not there. In the kitchen, I found a note on the table, indicating that she had gone to Terry. Understanding the message, I discarded the note and promptly contacted Carlo, informing him of Connie's claim. Despite her assertion, my surveillance revealed that Connie was currently at Phil and Terry's house, though Terry herself was absent. As mentioned earlier, I have someone keeping an eye on her, and he'll continue to do so. Later, 3 hours passed, and Connie finally returned home. Greeting me, she kissed my cheek and headed to the kitchen. When she inquired about my day, I mentioned Carlo's plan without divulging details, observing her expectation for more information. After a minute of anticipation, she asked about the discussion. I replied that it concerned a cousin's personal file, requiring permission, and involved suspicions about a wife's behavior, seeking advice. Noticing the change in her expression, I smiled, acknowledging her attempt to appear nonchalant. Nevertheless, I reassured her that everything would be resolved in the end. She turned away, and the rest of the weekend dragged on slowly. Despite the strong desire, I could not bring myself to make love to her. I couldn't help but look at the photos that Carlo shared with me, where she is captured with Tony. I was surprised how she could continue a relationship with him and still behave completely normally around me. She had an exceptional talent for deception and acting, far surpassing all my ideas. Saturday night passed without any major problems, but on Sunday night, her body language made it clear that she wanted closeness. I kissed her gently, but the image of her with Tony wouldn't leave my mind, making me doubt that she really could only be mine. It felt like a betrayal. We both lay in bed in silence, lost in our thoughts. As soon as she fell asleep, I quietly slipped out of bed and went downstairs. I was sitting at my computer, immersed in work, when a message from Carlo caught my attention. Looking at my watch, I realized that it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Everything seemed to fall into place and completely coincided with our previous conversations. Feeling confident in my abilities, I came to the conclusion that now it remains only to plan a short trip with an overnight stay on Wednesday, and it will be possible to get down to business. I quickly replied to Carlo's message, confirming my agreement. But sleep did not come, and anger boiled inside. In the morning, after a quick shower, I got dressed and went downstairs. Connie greeted me with a warm smile and served me a delicious breakfast, coffee, and toast. She settled into her seat and sipped her coffee delicately. I mentioned that I had to go to Leeds on Wednesday, and as I spoke, her eyes met mine over the rim of her cup. Sensing her thoughts, she casually inquired if I would only be gone for one night. I affirmed, but added that I wouldn't return until late Thursday night. Her gaze intensified as she asked if this was related to Carlo and the cousin I had mentioned, suggesting he might need support. Expressing my unease about Carlo, I admitted uncertainty regarding the kind of help he could provide. Reassuringly, she mentioned that I might be surprised, highlighting Carlo's formidable problem-solving abilities. Observing her pale expression, I realized she was actively formulating a plan in her mind. Glancing at my watch, I stood up from my seat, signaling the start of the workday. It was time for me to leave. "My dear, take care of yourself and behave while I'm away." I went to a meeting with a lawyer, discussed options for an hour, and signed necessary documents. The lawyer already has copies of the envelope contents. He assured me everything would be ready by Wednesday afternoon, confirming our agreement. I hurried to the bank, moved all our savings to a new account in my name. Additionally, I sent a significant amount to Carlo, asking him to hold it for me. I left the current account alone, covering our bills, and we had almost no extra money. I emptied our safe deposit box of cash and jewelry, opening a separate account only in my name at another bank. I also decided to stop her allowance, thinking it would put her in a tough spot by the end of the month. Happy with my day, I entered my office and went about my usual work. Sadie, my secretary, was an invaluable assistant, handling work competently, maybe even more so than me. During a momentary break in signing documents, I noticed Sadie looking at me. Turning my chair, I faced her. We've known each other for almost 5 years. She's always been professional and devoted, though tension with Connie seemed present. I believed it was related to gender issues. Looking into Sadie's worried eyes, I realized I could no longer ignore the situation. The desire to confide in someone became overwhelming, and she sensed my inner turmoil. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my thoughts and informed her about potential disruptions this week. I emphasized that if I couldn't be there, she knew what needed to be done to ensure everything ran smoothly. She assured me of her support. Curious if she could assist further, Sadie turned around. A refined and intelligent woman of about 40 whom I trusted implicitly. Confessing to her, I revealed that Connie was cheating on me. Clearly taken aback, Sadie expressed her disbelief and asked if I had concrete evidence. Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded in confirmation. Feeling my pain, Sadie hugged me tightly, providing the comfort and support that seemed absent at home. Tears streamed down for the first time since I received the devastating news a few days earlier. She held me until I regained my composure, looking into my tear-filled eyes and reassuring me of my goodness. She encouraged me not to let anyone tell me otherwise. Concerned about my future plans, she inquired about my intentions. Determined, I stated my decision to file for divorce and end the relationship completely. Despite my hesitation, I made it clear that I didn't want to involve her or anyone else. Worried, Sadie urged me to be careful and pleaded for a promise not to do anything rash. The rest of the day felt like a drag, each moment seeming like hard work. Sadie's devotion and support were invaluable, turning her into a precious friend who stood by me during this challenging time. Her husband, whoever he was undoubtedly lucky. She fearlessly protected me from any threats, dealing with them with her usual flair. I heard her push someone away with a stern warning, making me smile. I was pleased to have kind-hearted people like her by my side. When I got home, sitting with Connie and watching TV, the phone rang. She took it to the hallway to answer. Although I heard her speaking softly, the conversation remained unintelligible. After about 5 minutes, she returned. Curious, I inquired about the phone call. Connie dismissed it as unimportant, mentioning Terry discussing her claims and Phil initiating another pointless argument with a hint of annoyance in her tone. I hope they find a way to reconcile. Sensing my confusion, I asked, "What do you mean? Are they in serious trouble?" Phil didn't say anything. Carefully watching her expression, I searched for signs that might reveal the truth. "Well," she began hesitantly, "it's not really a serious crisis, more of a small disagreement. I'm sure they'll sort it out." Suddenly it dawned on me. Is this really what happened? When we were in the restaurant, Connie looked at me nervously, not realizing I noticed the tension between them and her role in this. While spinning a web of lies, it became noticeable that Connie was entangled in her own deception. Despite her discomfort, I couldn't figure out Terry and Phil's role in this situation. I remembered their intense communication during our walk, an argument boiling all evening. "So that's what you talked to Phil about?" I asked, trying to figure out if she was trying to mediate. Connie's response was restrained and somewhat frank. "Yes, Terry asked me to talk to Phil, that's all." Intrigued, I continued to extract information. "What was it about, Connie? Perhaps I can help?" A smile appeared when I saw my wife struggle with the tangled web of lies. Sensing her anxiety, she calmed me down. "It's all right, Sal. I'm sure they are close to solving their problems," she offered optimistically. Expressing relief, I acknowledged the good news about my friend's improving marriage. However, a sudden anxiety prompted me to ask if he was cheating. Connie swiftly reassured me that there was nothing of that sort. My curiosity lingered, leading me to inquire if Terry might be cheating. Sensing my curiosity, Connie suggested not getting involved and letting them figure it out. Fully agreeing, I remarked that it was precisely what I had in mind. However, I mentioned that when I saw Phil, I might check to ensure he was okay. As I shifted my attention back to the TV, Connie's narrowed eyes signaled the end of our discussion. After a few minutes, I revisited the topic, questioning what the conversation was about if neither of them was cheating. Unable to resist, Connie abruptly left the sofa, visibly agitated, and hurried out of the room. I sat and chuckled to myself. By now, I had enough information, but the other couple's role was still a mystery. The rest of the evening passed with mutual avoidance, and we both preferred silence to more discussion. Deciding to address the issue of Phil and Terry the next day, I woke up early. On Tuesday, I left the house just as Connie was coming down the stairs, still looking a little puzzled. "I have to move. Lots to do before I leave tomorrow," I told her without staying long and headed for the garage. As I moved, my thoughts returned to recent events. Until last week, everything was relatively calm. That changed when Connie met Tony a few months ago during a night out with Terry. They were in a small club with friends when Tony walked in, offered to buy everyone a drink, and caught the girls' attention. During that meeting, Terry noticed a connection between Tony and Connie. Worried, Terry expressed concern about Tony's character to her friend. She advised her to stay away from him, mentioning that he had made advances towards her in the past. In an attempt to calm Terry, Connie reassured her, stating that she had her phone with her, and noting that Tony was an attractive and smooth man. Terry shook her head, emphasizing her warning and urging Connie not to entertain the thought. Terry had done her duty as a protector, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something unsettling was behind Connie's eyes. The rest of the evening passed without any notable incidents, at least from Terry's point of view. Despite Terry's warning, Tony managed to get Connie's phone number. Over the next few days, Tony somehow got Connie's number and made several calls involving her in innocent conversations accompanied by light flirting. As the next bachelorette party approached, Connie realized that Tony would be attending again. This time there was dancing, and as soon as Tony took her in his arms, he began to use seduction tactics, showering her with flattery and compliments. He began numerous subtle touches while they were talking, leaving the club with Terry's worried friend, who scolded her and urged her to end it before something happened. Connie stubbornly kept silent, brushing off Terry's warnings and insisting that nothing had happened yet. But when Terry saw her, Tony just smiled resolutely, continuing to get his way, confident that he would eventually win Connie over. In the following weeks, phone conversations between Connie and Tony became more frequent, and their flirting intensified. Tony began to seriously pursue Connie. The dynamic changed when Terry was unable to join their usual night out, giving Tony the opportunity he had been waiting for. It was during one of their conversations that he saw a chance to make his move. Tony, using his charm, managed to convince Connie to meet him at the club, emphasizing that it would be a friendly relationship, nothing more. Connie thought about the idea, and seizing on a sudden opportunity, eagerly agreed to the meeting. Unlike her usual outfit for meeting Terry, Connie dressed up, feeling that this occasion had special meaning. Excitement bubbled in her veins, overcoming any doubts she may have had. She couldn't hide her joy, and she didn't want to, in her opinion. Talking to Tony created a connection, and she was ready for the next step. Without slowing down, she grabbed her purse and headed for the front door, unable to contain her excitement. That important evening marked the start of a new chapter in Connie and Tony's life. Their bond grew stronger, and meetings became more frequent. Their evening was filled with flirting, gentle touches, and playful dancing. Tony took her to his car and drove her to the Marriott Hotel. Believing Connie was ready for the next step, they spent the night together, their passion lasting until almost 1 o'clock in the morning. When Connie realized the time, panic set in. She quickly got ready and dressed, urging Tony to take her home. Despite Tony's agreement, the journey alone would have taken at least another 30 minutes. That night served as a wake-up call for Connie, and she started feeling uneasy. But in the following weeks, she continued dating Tony, unable to resist the temptation of their connection. During my absence, she stayed with Tony at the hotel, engaging in various activities. Terry advised Connie to stop before facing consequences. Weeks later, Terry discussed the situation with her husband Phil, hoping he could influence Tony. Terry explicitly asked Connie to stop and talk to Tony, seeking Phil's support. Phil was torn between loyalty to his brother and friend, making it increasingly difficult to find a solution without causing serious consequences. Connie knew their romance should end soon. She understood the risk she was taking increased the allure of continuing the illicit relationship. It was a dangerous game, and if anyone found out, chaos would follow. The recent restaurant incident, combined with leading questions, showed the situation was getting out of control. Connie understood Tony didn't have sincere feelings, considering her only as an opportunity. Despite this, she still felt drawn to him. Deciding that tomorrow would mark the last meeting, concluding the destructive cycle, Connie made up her mind, intending to end it after one final night together. Despite the decision, she still had to convince Tony. Late at night, legal documents from the lawyer were prepared in her car. Feeling tense, I sought solace in my trusted bottle of whiskey. Observing Connie, it was clear she grappled with her problems. When she inquired about my well-being, I didn't immediately respond. Instead, I turned to her, meeting her eyes to gauge her reaction. She seemed scared and anxious, evidently affected by the events of the past day. I muttered that it had been a tough day, and mentioned the need to shower for the upcoming meeting with Carlo. The mention of Carlo appeared to disturb her, carrying a sense of horror. After the shower, I went downstairs, catching Connie's gaze in the kitchen. Casually asking about dinner, she suggested ordering takeout, expressing her reluctance to cook. I agreed, and we settled on Chinese cuisine. I called and placed the order, and while waiting, we sat in the living room with the TV on. Dinner passed quietly, almost in suspense. Connie casually inquired about my departure time the next morning, to which I explained my plan to leave around 9 in the morning for an 11 o'clock flight. I added that the issue couldn't be addressed until the evening, and it would be an opportunity to finally meet cousin Carlo, trying to find a positive aspect in the current situation. Acknowledging the importance of family, Connie looked at me with a hint of sadness in her eyes. Perhaps she was contemplating that tomorrow could mark the end of it all. The next morning, I woke up to the delightful smell of freshly brewed coffee, a scent I always appreciated at the start of the day. While I sipped hot coffee, which served as a magical elixir that fully awakened me, Connie was preparing breakfast. I sat down at the table and began to eat toast. My stomach still felt heavy from last night's dinner. Silence filled the kitchen. While we both enjoyed coffee, a calm atmosphere prevailed. We exchanged fleeting glances, but quickly averted our eyes to avoid giving ourselves away. The atmosphere was tense, and we both wanted it to be over. Checking my watch, I realized it was time to leave. Urgently, I mentioned that I had to go and pick up Carlo from home. As I passed Connie, she looked at me with a smile and wished me a safe journey and a speedy return. Moving forward, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders, and tears welled up in my eyes. With a deep sigh of relief, I turned the steering wheel and drove away from my wife, deciding not to look back. My face was flooded with tears, and my heart was heavy with grief. It was a day of reckoning, the culmination of it all. A few minutes later, Connie picked up the phone and listened to the beeps in her ear. She whispered that I was gone and asked if the plan could still proceed that night. The response was affirmative, with assurances of making the night unforgettable. Connie explained that she had convinced Phil to leave them alone and shared that he was becoming increasingly upset with her. She inquired if he had mentioned anything to me, and the answer was affirmative, but she had instructed him to mind his own business. Despite the challenges, she expressed eagerness for the night ahead and shared the arrangements for their meeting at the same room as last time. Ending the call, the man couldn't help but smile. He quickly composed a text message with the details of the lovers' date, collected his listening equipment, and left the place of observation. Carlo looked at the message, a grim smile appearing on his face. He expressed concern about the situation and questioned my certainty about it. I assured him of my love for Connie and my determination to make her understand the gravity of her actions, even if it meant enduring lasting consequences with her lover. With some time before the action started, we decided to have a snack. Carlo dissuaded me from reaching out to Terry and Phil, emphasizing the potential legal consequences if they became aware of my awareness. He assured me that there would be time to address that later and asked me not to worry. Leaving the bar, I was introduced to Carlo's brother Alfredo and his daughter Alicia. Alfredo apologized for his daughter's impulsive nature and explained that they can be assertive these days. Expressing understanding, I greeted Alfredo warmly, emphasizing the importance of family. Alfredo smiled and conveyed his regards to his wife and the rest of his family. A little after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, an incoming call signal was heard on the mobile phone. Glancing at the screen, I noticed that it was Connie. I greeted her and asked what had happened. She explained that she called to ensure I had arrived safely and inquired if everything was okay. I assured her that we were both fine and mentioned that we were having a late lunch before continuing on our way. Curious about her evening plans, I asked about her intentions, subtly concealing my true agenda. She mentioned that she was going to visit Terry and believed everything was fine there. I responded, trying to maintain a neutral tone. Continuing the conversation, I casually mentioned that I was planning to call Phil later, as I believed he was going out with his brother. Expressing curiosity about Phil's brother, I inquired about his personality. Connie offered a vague response, mentioning that she had only met him once but found him to be somewhat similar to Phil. With a brief farewell, I explained that we needed to check into the hotel before our evening meeting, wishing her a pleasant evening and asking her to say hello to Terry. Ending the call, I looked at Carlo, and he sensed the hidden pain in my expression. He offered his support, acknowledging that it was done, and suggested we go meet the others. Leaving Alfredo at the bar, we proceeded to the private rooms, where Carlo introduced me to a group of 4 people familiar to him. He assured me of their trustworthiness, emphasizing that they had proven themselves countless times in the past. At that moment, Carlo's phone rang, and after answering the call, he nodded, relaying the message that we would be leaving in 5 minutes. Observing my watch, I noticed it was already 8 o'clock. Time was slipping away fast. The guys left the room and headed to the waiting car. They grabbed a minibus to reach their destination. At the same time, Carlo and I went out the back door and hopped into the prepared Mercedes. This is how my story brought me to where I am now. We parked the Mercedes on a quiet street, just 200 meters from the hotel. In silence, we sat there, and by 9 o'clock in the evening, Carlo's phone signaled a message. After confirming the team's arrival and placement, we stayed silent until another message appeared on Carlo's phone, indicating that the exit was guarded. "Okay, let's go," Carlo said, breaking the silence. After a moment, I followed suit, and we headed for the hotel lobby. Time seemed to have sped up. My heart raced with anticipation. Carlo got out of the car first and directed me to the indicated room number. Reaching door 415, a feeling nagged at me that my wife might be behind it with another man. Just as we reached the door, 4 men in hotel-style uniforms seemed to appear out of nowhere. Glancing around the corridor, relieved it was empty, Carlo warned about the nearby CCTV cameras. Leading the team into the bedroom, Carlo's determined eyes met mine. The lights turned on, revealing a scene that left my heart sinking. From my vantage point, I could see my wife in bed with Tony, oblivious to the impending intrusion. The details of what happened to her lover are hard to convey in this context. Everything unfolded in a whirlwind of emotions. Turning on the light, I entered the room. My wife, lying on the bed, locked eyes with me. Shuddering, she tightly shielded herself, tears streaming down her face. Muffled sobs and unintelligible mutterings escaped her mouth. Love and hate collided, and rage took the forefront among the overwhelming feelings. Carlo stepped forward, gripping my arm and gently taking an object from my hand. His determined eyes met mine, urging me to calm down and gain control of my emotions. At this moment, Connie, consumed by fear, stared at the two imposing figures in front of her, shaking her head vigorously. Tears streamed down her face as she remained wordless, intensifying the destruction of her evening. Sensing it was time to leave, I observed a subtle movement from Carlo, who was checking his phone. He mentioned that it was time for us to depart. Following him out of the room and leaving Connie behind, Carlo remarked that I had handled the situation well. He added that, for a moment, he thought I might lose control of my anger. I responded with a grim laugh, assuring him that so far, it was just a good scare. I explained that the real lesson would be when she meets Tony again, and that there was no need for me to get my hands dirty since the guys would handle him properly. Carlo understood my desire for Tony to know I was there, but assured me that he wouldn't forget the experience anytime soon. As we walked through dimly lit streets towards our destination, Carlo mentioned that rooms were ready for both of us when we were ready. We entered the bar where Alfredo awaited us. Approaching 1 o'clock in the morning, Carlo's phone beeped with a message confirming that everything was settled. Expressing my gratitude for what they did, I started to muse. But Carlo interrupted me, stating that it was over and I needed to figure out the situation with her. Understanding his point, no further words were exchanged. The weight of the situation pressed on me as we left her at the hotel. I wondered how she would find her way home and what she would say about this unexpected turn of events. Now aware that I knew about her actions, would she admit to them or remain silent? Despite catching her in the act, I doubted she would willingly confess. Carlos's words brought me back. Rooms are prepared for both of you when you are ready. Unable to sleep, I replayed the events of the previous night in my mind, thinking through every detail. Thoughts of Connie filled my mind, and a heavy sadness settled within me. She was the love of my life, my everything, and now it's all been destroyed. The only way left was to face her and see how this would unfold. Divorce papers were already in my hands, with the official copy supposed to be delivered today. Returning home, she wouldn't have doubts about what I knew. A chilling thought crossed my mind. What if she doesn't come home? Uncertainty added complexity to an already turbulent situation. Now that she knew I caught her at the hotel, Connie would likely be afraid to return home. I realized I needed to take measures, possibly rescheduling the delivery of the divorce papers to where she could find refuge, maybe with Terry. Almost 7 hours had passed, and Alicia abruptly woke me, informing me it was lunchtime and that I had 30 minutes. Carlo mentioned I had to catch an afternoon flight, so it was time to get up. Getting dressed, I saw a changed version of myself in the mirror, bearing the weight of recent events and signs of change. Sitting down with the others at the table, I sensed that the feeling of normality had turned surreal, yet oddly comforting. We shared a meal, talked, and even laughed, but time passed too quickly, and it was soon time to leave. Gathering our belongings, we headed to the waiting car. As we drove away, I gazed out the window, bidding farewell to the faces watching us. On the way home, I drove steadily and calmly. I dropped off Carlo, and Joanna welcomed him with joy, hugging him tightly, like newlyweds. She then turned to me, offering a tight hug for comfort. Carlo reassured me, expressing his belief that everything would eventually be fine. Despite my speechlessness, his comforting hug offered a glimmer of hope. Departing with a plan to call later, I nodded in confirmation and drove home, attempting to avoid dwelling on empty thoughts. Upon reaching my front door and entering, an eerie silence pervaded the house. The heating provided warmth, but the cozy atmosphere was absent. With cautious steps, I explored the living room and kitchen, noting the emptiness and quietness. Checking my mobile phone, I found no calls or messages from Connie. Overwhelmed with disappointment and sadness, I sank into a chair in the living room. A photo of Connie and me on the mantel caught my eye, sparking anger. I impulsively threw the framed photo across the room. As it crashed against the wall, the phone rang. With apprehension and curiosity, I answered the call, still carrying a residual tone of anger. "Hello?" I responded. A hesitant female voice on the other end identified herself as Terry. Despite my harsh tone, she inquired about Connie, revealing that Connie was with her, upset and afraid to go home. Suppressing anger, I asked Terry to let Connie talk to me. Advising Terry to ask Connie about the events, I listened as the conversation unfolded. After a while, Terry returned to the phone, expressing genuine concern for Connie, who remained silent. Instructing Terry to tell Connie that I would pick her up, I heard Connie scream, confirming my suspicions. Terry, uncertain of what to say, stammered, and I calmly acknowledged that I knew everything. Apologizing, Terry shared the unsuccessful attempts to stop the events with Phil. Expressing my sadness over the situation, I mentioned the impact on our friendship, but suggested avoiding further discussion. In response, Terry whispered an understanding acknowledgement and apologized once again. I took a deep breath, attempting to find some semblance of completeness in the midst of turmoil. With gratitude, I thanked Terry, acknowledging that our once strong friendship had been irreparably changed by the actions of those involved. Ending the conversation, I informed Terry that I wouldn't be coming for Connie. Advising her to relay the message, I sternly instructed Terry that Connie's belongings would be packed and ready for her to collect, with a warning that any delay would result in disposal. Emphasizing that Connie no longer lived with me, I mentioned that some papers for her would be delivered to my address. Urging caution in any actions or attempts to contact me, I stressed the need for careful consideration. Clearly and with strength, I spoke to Terry, laying out all the details and emphasizing that I haven't heard from Connie since around 7:30 p.m. I anticipated some reaction after she received the documents, but according to Terry, she appeared very nervous when she arrived at their house. Carlo, finding humor in the situation, grinned. Thinking about the upcoming day, I mentally listed tasks that needed attention. First, contacting my office to clarify work matters, then dealing with a locksmith, addressing banking issues, and handling logistics. Painful as it was to admit, the trust we once shared had completely vanished. Remaining in this relationship after the divorce papers were delivered last night was impossible. I expected to hear from Connie today once she gathered her thoughts, but it was already 9 when a knock interrupted my thoughts. Upon opening the door, I found Terry and Phil standing there, their unexpected presence casting a shadow in the room. Waiting in silence, Terry eventually spoke, expressing remorse for their actions. Acknowledging their request to come in, I gestured them to the living room. As they settled on the sofa, I took a chair, bracing myself for the necessary conversation. Curious, I asked, "So what did you guys want to discuss?" Paying close attention to Terry and Phil, I listened as Phil began with an apology, admitting his failure to inform me about Connie's extramarital pursuits. Terry echoed his sentiments, expressing regret for being unable to reach Connie and prevent her actions. While their words evoked a sense of offense and betrayal, I recognized the sincerity behind their apologies. Wanting clarity, I questioned Terry about her statement that Connie didn't understand anything. Confused and concerned, I asked, "What do you mean, Terry? I was away on Wednesday, and when I called, Connie mentioned being left by Tony at a hotel. Are you suggesting something happened between them?" Phil, filled with concern, replied, "We're not certain. We tried contacting my brother, but there's been no response. Connie is unable to provide much information. All she said was that she felt tied up and Tony had left her at the hotel." The growing anxiety within me intensified as I struggled to comprehend the events between Connie and Tony. Pressing for more details, I directed my disappointment toward Phil. "Come on, Phil," I urged. "She must have shared more than that. What happened? Clearly something went wrong. Did he misuse her?" Phil and Terry exchanged surprised glances. taken aback by the intensity of my anger. Summoning my strength, I redirected the conversation. I inquired about Connie's well-being after the delivery of the divorce papers. Terry affirmed this, describing Connie's emotional turbulence and the new outburst triggered by the documents. Connie's state of confusion and imbalance deeply affected her, intensifying my anger and fear for what traumatic events she might be withholding. Expressing my frustration, I asserted, "Well, she brought this upon herself. If she's hurting now, then so be it." Terry and Phil, taken aback by my intense anger, attempted to reason with me. Terry, with a cracking voice, urged me to consider reconciliation, emphasizing the severity of divorce and suggesting talking to Connie first. As I listened to Terry's plea, my anger began to wane, replaced by conflicting emotions. The decision ahead demanded careful consideration and open communication. Recognizing Terry's sincere concern as that of a true friend, I admitted to liking her. Despite their involvement, Terry's words compelled a serious approach. Deep down, I acknowledged that facing Connie was inevitable. Taking a deep breath, I decided, "All right, Terry, I will talk to her, but only after her belongings are removed from our house. It will be just her and me. I'll call her and provide details about when and where this conversation will take place. How does that sound?" Terry, overwhelmed with emotion, hugged me tightly, and I noticed Phil's confused and regretful expression. Expressing gratitude to Terry for her understanding, I assured her, "Thank you, Terry. I will contact her soon. Please ask her to wait for my call and don't worry, I won't leave her in limbo for long." Phil, conveying regret, muttered sympathetically, "Sal, I'm sorry. My brother certainly deserved a good thrashing from you. I wouldn't blame you if you did." Observing Terry and Phil leave from the window, their hurried departure indicated their destination, my soon-to-be ex-wife. Lost in thought, I contemplated Terry's words, realizing there was some truth in them. It was time to talk to Connie, and this conversation could no longer be postponed. Feeling detached from the current situation, I sought solace in a conversation with my longtime friend Sadie. Our discussion lasted for half an hour, during which I attentively listened as Sadie shared details of her successful life without my presence. She truly was an extraordinary woman. When she touched on Connie's topic, her tone changed to that of a concerned mother. It felt like listening to my own mother's lectures. In the end, Sadie insisted I have dinner at her house tonight with her husband. Feeling somewhat obligated, I reluctantly agreed to her request. The rest of the day involved various changes. Locks were replaced, rooms were rearranged, clothes were packed or discarded, and photos were reorganized or destroyed. Each action symbolized moving forward and parting with the past. As evening approached, I found myself lost in thought, gazing out of the window and contemplating the task that lay ahead. Understanding the need to gather my strength for what awaited, I decided to postpone making the call until the morning, feeling a sense of weariness. Another restless night followed, offering no relief from the weight of anxious thoughts. In the early morning, just before 7:30, an unexpected call disrupted the silence. Phil's voice came through, delivering news about Tony's condition. Apparently, Tony had been in the hospital for several days, injured but in stable condition. The news had a minimal effect on my emotions, and my response carried a cold detachment. I made it clear to Phil that I harbored no sympathy for Tony, stating, "I hope you don't expect sympathy from me, Phil. As far as I understand, he was lucky that our paths did not cross. I don't have the slightest desire to show him any respect." Phil seemed to accept the frankness of my words and acknowledged the justified anger I felt towards Tony. He refrained from asking certain questions, recognizing the depth of my emotions. Expressing remorse for not being as good a friend to me as I had been to him, Phil conveyed his understanding of the irreparable past. I reassured him that it was not his fault and expressed gratitude for informing me about Tony. After bidding farewell and expressing love to Terry, Phil concluded the call. Placing the phone back on the stand, I turned my attention to the view outside the window, contemplating the garden, enjoying the silence, and reflecting on the unfolding events. A calm atmosphere enveloped me as I observed random birds flying to the feeder and feasting on the seeds I happily supplied them. Watching the serene communion with nature through glass always brought me a sense of calm. It was at such moments, immersed in the beauty of the natural world, that my thoughts could flow freely. Dialing Carlo's number on my mobile phone, I shared the news about Tony. His response was brief, but filled with a sense of satisfaction. He noted that the work was done well. Setting the phone aside, I took a sip of the coffee in my hand, relishing the aromas of the day. Soon, the phone rang again, disrupting the peaceful atmosphere. This time, I decided to let the answering machine handle it. Listening carefully, I heard Connie's trembling voice, leaving a message filled with uncertainty and emotion. "I'm sorry, but I have to explain. I need you. I need to get home. I'm so sorry." Connie's desperate plea echoed in the voicemail. Sobs interrupted her words, penetrating my soul and making my heart ache in my chest. Each tearful phrase caused a shockwave of emotions, leaving me breathless. When the message ended, I felt that I was breathing heavily, and contradictory thoughts were spinning in my head. I knew that today I would have to solve this situation, but I wanted her to wait so that she would understand that my decision was made not only in response to her message, it has to be a carefully thought-out decision. For the next few hours, I wandered aimlessly around the house, lost in deep thought. The once familiar rooms now seemed empty, emphasizing the emptiness that had formed after Connie's absence. In place of her belongings, there were voids that served as a visual reminder of our life together. I contacted Sadie and asked for help from several people with a van to move all of Connie's things. Within an hour, the boxes and bags I packed were neatly loaded into the back of the van. I watched the car pull away, setting off to return Connie's things. Soon, I was expecting my phone to buzz with a notification about the delivery of things. This meant the final completion of the one-way trip. At the final stage of our life together, Terry called to inform me about Connie's belongings. I expressed brief gratitude for the organization, feeling a sense of completeness. Terry updated me, mentioning that they stored most items in the warehouse, keeping only the ones I marked as personal. Asked whether I would talk to Connie, I firmly instructed Terry to call her. As I awaited Connie's response, my tone remained controlled but firm. When I spoke to her, I interrupted her attempt to apologize, stating, "Leave it alone, Connie. Now you have answers to questions you never asked yourself when you were busy with other things." Despite her desperate pleas, I made it clear that we had nothing more to discuss, firmly stating, "This is where our journey ends. Do you really think you can tell me anything to help me deal with this?" Connie continued to plead, asking to come home and talk. Prepared to listen, though unable to promise anything, I responded with fatigue in my voice, "I'll listen, but I can't promise anything." I concluded the conversation, carrying the weight of her words in my memory. Her voice held pain, and I wondered if she could sense the suffering in mine. Leaning back in my chair, I reflected on our marriage and the happiness I thought we shared. Doubt crept in, questioning how well I knew her and whether my assumptions about our relationship were too idealistic. Delving into introspection, I realized I may still have a lot to learn about the person I thought I knew closely. Although I didn't suspect anything until that fateful night, it dawned on me that Connie might have engaged in similar behavior. Before taking a deep breath, I decided to approach the upcoming meeting with restrained emotions, mentally preparing for what might be the last act of our marriage. The doorbell announced Connie's arrival, and nervously opening the door, time seemed to stop. It was our first meeting after that solemn night at the hotel, and the shock resonated within me. As she entered the living room, a thin sigh escaped her lips, replaced by a strangled sob. She noticed the empty spaces on the walls, devoid of photos and cherished souvenirs that once adorned our life together. Standing in front of me, covering her mouth with her hand, tears welled in her eyes. I stated coldly, bitterness in my voice, informing Connie that everything was gone, pointing out the emptiness throughout the house. As Connie expressed confusion, I reiterated that I never wanted this to happen. She pleaded, her voice shaking with remorse, and I acknowledged that her actions had consequences, the result of her infidelity, extramarital affair, and connection with another man. In the ensuing silence, Connie sat down on the sofa. With a stern expression, I pressed her to speak. She apologized, expressing regret and admitting her inability to resist, describing it as a dependency. Struggling with emotions, I wondered if there was still room in my heart for forgiveness. I then revealed that I had talked to Terry and Phil, gaining a fuller understanding of what happened, and expressing frustration with the lack of clarity on why it happened. She shifted uncomfortably, looking down at her feet, admitting that she couldn't answer why she got involved with the new and exciting person. I argued about the undeniable fact that she slept with him consistently, expressing my resentment and disappointment over the course of several weeks. Connie, laden with guilt, acknowledged that she messed up and expressed a desire to find a way to move past it. Changing the topic, I inquired about the whereabouts of the person she was involved with. Connie denied referring to him as her lover, explaining that she went on dates with him, but emphasizing her love for me and apologizing tearfully for her terrible mistake. Listening to her plea, anger boiled inside me as I questioned her sincerity and trustworthiness. I pointed out her deceitful actions and questioned why I should believe anything she said. Connie, recognizing the extent of my pain and betrayal, continued crying, realizing the precarious state of our relationship. Demanding to know if I had communicated with my counterpart, I harshly questioned her, waiting for her answer. She tearfully revealed that she hadn't heard anything about him and expressed her reluctance to know more, considering him the one who ruined her life. Noticing the missing wedding photo, Connie walked around the room, observing the void left by the absence of memories. Emotionally drained, she sank onto the sofa, acknowledging the irreversible loss. The silence between us reflected the vast gap created by her actions. Pleading for a chance and expressing a note of defeat, but hope in her eyes, Connie asked if there was really no chance for reconciliation. Taking a deep breath, I met her gaze, conveying a mix of suffering and resilience. Declaring that her betrayal shattered my heart and constituted disrespect for our feelings and those of our friends, I asserted that our marriage was over. I left her to face the consequences of her choices, urging her to sign the divorce papers and leave. Expressing finality and fatigue, I stated that everything ended with her, instructing her to leave my house and the city for peace. Sitting dejectedly, Connie absorbed my words and slowly stood to leave. I followed her to the door, watching as she opened her car door. When she looked back and apologized, mixed emotions stirred in me. Closing the door, I sealed not only her exit, but also the end of our marriage. 2 days later, Carlo informed me that Connie had left the country, escorted by his people, realizing she wouldn't find peace in the city.
Story 3.
Growing up, my life had been simple, marked by familiar traditions and predictable routines. I was raised in a small suburban town where everyone seemed to know everyone else. My parents, devoted yet practical, instilled in me values centered on loyalty, hard work, and trust. They were pillars of the community. My father worked at a local bank, and my mother taught 3rd grade at the nearby elementary school. From them, I learned the importance of building a solid foundation, both in life and relationships. When I first met Marie during a college lecture on Renaissance literature, I was instantly captivated by her energy. She laughed freely, gestured vividly while talking, and always managed to draw people into her world with ease. I admired her ability to bring warmth to any room, a quality that stood in stark contrast to my quieter, more introspective nature. Our connection grew through shared late-night conversations and library study sessions, where I often watched her as she recited poetry or discussed history with a passion that lit her eyes. After graduation, our paths converged naturally into marriage, a commitment I cherished as the beginning of a lifelong partnership. The early years were rich with adventure, spontaneous road trips, and the thrill of exploring life together. But, as is often the case, the initial fire cooled into a more measured companionship. I told myself that this shift was normal. It was what mature love evolved into, a blend of patience, comfort, and subtle devotion. The thought that anything could disrupt this familiar life never crossed my mind. One quiet evening, I found myself at the dining table, skimming through the medical records of my daughter, Katie. The paperwork was part of her kindergarten enrollment, and I was mindlessly reviewing the details while my wife, Marie, had placed the school forms nearby. As I leafed through the documents, my eyes fell on a note that would shatter the very core of my world. In the section that listed Katie's blood type, I read A. For an instant, my mind went blank. Gripped by shock, I struggled to comprehend what this simple detail implied. I walked over to the cabinet and unearthed 2 pieces of our medical history. They confirmed what I remembered with sharp clarity. My blood type was B, while Marie's was O. This combination made it biologically impossible for Katie to be my child. If Marie is her mother and I was there when Katie was born, I thought, then the father had to be someone with type A. The kids were already asleep. Marie was upstairs watching TV. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat in the backyard, thinking. How was my marriage? I muttered to myself. It was fine, I guess. Pretty average. There were good times and bad. It depended on the day. When we first started dating and during the early months of our marriage, Marie and I were madly in love. We made love constantly, sometimes with intensity. Even when we weren't in bed, we were affectionate, holding hands, touching as we passed each other. But over time, that faded. Doesn't that happen to every marriage? I asked myself. But now, with undeniable proof of her betrayal staring me in the face, everything I thought I knew about our relationship came apart. I thought, did things change slowly or suddenly? It felt like both. Our decline in closeness was gradual at first. But about 6 years ago, just a few months before Katie was conceived, there were some odd moments. Marie, usually open and loving, began acting strange. One evening, she came home very late, let me kiss her briefly, then went straight to the shower and avoided me for the rest of the night. The next morning, she was distant and curt, but that night, she was different. She came home early, made a special dinner, and later initiated passionate sex with enthusiasm that I thought we'd lost. We embraced afterward, and Marie said, "I love you so much." That week, we had passionate sex several more times. But soon after, there was another cold night. She came home late, didn't speak, and headed straight to the shower. Over the next 2 months, I barely recognized her. Marie was sometimes warm and loving, other times cold and detached, sometimes attentive, other times distracted and irritable, sometimes patient, other times short-tempered. I asked her a few times, "Is something wrong, Marie? Are we okay? Problems at work?" The only reply I got was, "I don't know, Bill. I'm just a bit stressed. Sorry." After a few months, things normalized, but it wasn't like it was at the start of our marriage. Marie's mood swings were less intense, but she was no longer affectionate. Her interest in sex dwindled. We made love no more than once a week, sometimes every 2 weeks, and only when I brought it up forcefully. Any gentle suggestion, like, "Want to fool around tonight?" was met with a sharp refusal. I had to remind her how long it had been for her to agree. And even then, she made it clear it was just to appease me. Is this how all marriages go? I wondered. I only knew mine, so I couldn't say. I often thought about what might be wrong, even considering she might be having an affair. But soon after, Marie got pregnant, and the excitement of expecting Katie pushed my worries aside. When Katie was born, exhaustion from taking care of her made Marie's disinterest in sex more understandable, though it still bothered me. When Katie was 3, Marie became pregnant again, and Brian was born right after Katie turned 4. Bill and Marie, once lovers and spouses, became Bill and Marie, the parents of 2 beautiful, tiring kids. We both loved our children dearly, and even though I now realize I was deeply unhappy with our marriage and the near absence of closeness, I didn't see it then. And if I did, I just assumed all parents of young kids went through this. But now, with the shocking revelation that Katie wasn't my child, the events from 6 years ago suddenly made sense. Marie must have started an affair around that time, I reasoned. That explained the coldness, the showers, and the sudden affectionate spells, which could have been guilt, or an attempt to hold on to her marriage. Sitting in the yard as darkness fell and stars appeared, my shock turned into anger. Not only had Marie betrayed me, but she'd given me someone else's child to raise, maybe even more than one. Maybe Brian isn't mine either, I thought. If I had only been thinking of punishing Marie at that moment, I would have stormed into the house, shown her the blood-type evidence, forced her to admit everything, and kicked her out. But it wasn't that simple. I loved my kids, regardless of whether they were biologically mine. If we divorced, Marie would likely get full custody once it came out that they weren't mine. I sat and thought, what do I want? I asked myself. The answers were surprisingly straightforward. First, I wanted to know exactly what Marie had done. Was it just a brief fling? Does she not even know that Katie isn't my child? Or has she known all along and been secretly seeing someone for years? And second, I wanted to raise my kids as my own and ensure they never found out I wasn't their biological father. Once I understood my goals, planning the next steps felt surprisingly simple. I went back inside, grabbed some cotton swabs, and quietly entered each child's room. I took cheek swabs from both children without waking them, labeling Katie's with a 2 and Brian's with a 3. Then I swabbed my own cheek and marked it with a 1. I had a friend who worked in a university chemistry lab, so I arranged for him to run DNA tests for me. This was my first move, the start of gathering the information I needed. When I got the results, I knew what my next step would be. A week later, my friend called with the results. He didn't know whose samples they were. I explained. I met people with the same last name, and we're checking if we're related. "Hey, Bill," he said. "The samples marked 2 and 3 are definitely related. They're brother and sister, but the 1 sample isn't related to them. Looks like those folks aren't your relatives after all." I thanked him and hung up. So Katie and Brian were siblings sharing the same parents. Marie had 2 kids with another man. But did she know? I wondered. She obviously knew she was involved with someone else. But did she know he was the father of our children? There was an easy way to find out. I walked into the kitchen where Marie was washing dishes. "Honey, I need to ask you something," I began, without making eye contact. She told me to go ahead, so I continued. "A colleague of mine has a biologist friend doing some DNA research, and he needs related samples. I said I'd take swabs from us and the kids. I already did the kids' swabs before bed, so we just need ours, okay?" I watched Marie closely as I spoke. Midway through, she tensed and nearly dropped the dish she was washing, but regained her composure and continued. After I finished speaking, Marie paused for a moment before turning to face me. "I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, Bill," she said. "How do we know what they'll do with the samples or if the information will stay private?" I opened my mouth to protest, but she interrupted me. "No, I'm really not okay with this. Please tell your colleague we're not interested." "Okay, honey," I replied calmly. "It's no big deal." Her reaction only confirmed my suspicions. I realized my next step had to be uncovering everything I could about her potential affair or affairs. Who was involved, where it happened, when, and perhaps even why. It was possible that Marie had hidden something in the house that might provide a clue, but I would need time for a thorough search. That Saturday, we had plans to visit her parents for the afternoon. Just minutes before we were supposed to leave, I walked into the bedroom and called our home phone from my cell, pretending to speak to my boss. Ending the fake call, I turned to Marie. "I'm so sorry, honey," I said, putting on an apologetic tone. "There's a crisis at work, and they need me for at least 4 hours. If I don't go, the company could be in serious trouble." "Damn it, Bill," Marie said, frustration evident in her voice. "My parents are really looking forward to seeing the kids." "I know," I said soothingly. "I'm really sorry. You go ahead, apologize for me. You and the kids will have fun, and I'll see you tonight." She reluctantly agreed and soon drove off with the kids. I now had a few hours to search the house systematically. I decided it was pointless to check areas I frequently used, as Marie likely wouldn't hide anything there. I skipped the kitchen, living room shelves, and common areas. I didn't bother with my side of the bedroom or bathroom, but I meticulously checked her closet and dresser drawers. I was only surprised to find some very hot lingerie I'd never seen her wear, hidden in the far back corner under regular clothes. Clearly, she didn't want me to know about them. Only the kids' rooms and the attic were left. The children's room seemed unlikely, so I climbed up to the attic. There were various old pieces of furniture, a couple of lamps, and boxes of pre-wedding books and items. It was too much to go through one by one, so I inspected more closely. I noticed one of 3 boxes in the corner was less dusty than the others. Upon closer inspection, I saw they had been moved more recently than the rest of the untouched attic junk. I focused on these 3 boxes and found everything I was looking for. These were all Marie's old belongings, mainly letters from friends and acquaintances from her college years. I also found a collection of letters and keepsakes from me, including sweet greeting cards and similar items. Near the bottom of one box, hidden under old papers, was a thin pile of newer notes and 2 videotapes. I took them out. The tapes were unmarked. The notes were from Harry and were brief but clearly erotic. I brought the tapes and notes downstairs for a closer look. After 20 minutes of reading through the notes, I knew almost everything I needed. Marie had been having an affair with Harry, her boss at work. The affair appeared to have started about 3 months before Katie was conceived, during the time when Marie was acting erratically at home. All the notes were from Harry to Marie, and they were rough and intense. There was no affection, only lust. From the start, their relationship seemed like a dominant submissive dynamic, with Harry taking charge. Some notes instructed her on how to dress for certain occasions. Others detailed how their next late-night encounter would go. A few congratulated her on the birth of their children and mocked me as a clueless fool raising kids that weren't mine. Harry clearly had no intention of acknowledging his children. I knew he was married to a kind woman named Caroline, and they had 3 kids. Caroline, it seemed, was just as unaware of his infidelity as I had been. My jaw clenched as I read. Harry had clearly dominated Marie, but she had willingly gone along with it. There was no hint of coercion or blackmail. Marie seemed to enjoy playing her submissive role and following his commands. It was also obvious that they both knew who the father of Marie's children was, and took some pleasure in keeping that secret from me. The notes didn't reveal much more about Marie herself, but there was no doubt she had deceived me for over 6 years, having children with another man while pretending to be my devoted wife. I had been simmering with anger for days, but these notes pushed me to the edge. My plans for revenge would now include Harry as well. I paused, then decided to play the tapes. The first showed Marie and Harry having sex. Judging by Marie's hairstyle, it was in a room I didn't recognize, likely Harry's house. The second was filmed more recently in my own bedroom. I wondered when Marie had the chance and remembered my business trips over the past year when she might have left the kids with her parents. The recordings confirmed Harry's dominance over Marie and her eager compliance. The lighting was dim, but they were both visible, and the sound was remarkably clear. Every word and moan was audible. On the first tape, at the start of their affair, Harry was already giving commands. He sat on the bed and ordered Marie to do a seductive dance, which she did, smiling. The sex was rough, not tender, and his tone was harsh. I was saddened to see that Marie was enjoying it. The second tape featured similar scenes, but had new, revealing dialogue. They lay on the bed, and Marie asked why Harry didn't mind me raising his children. He replied, "Bill's a decent guy, and as you say, he loves kids. I have my own 3, and I'm not worried. If not for that, I'd just tell you to leave him." "What's he good for besides changing diapers?" Harry asked. Marie responded, "That's not fair, Harry. Bill is kind and a good man. He truly loved me and provided well for us." "And that's why you let me have my fun all these years, huh?" Harry said. Marie smiled and playfully hit his arm. "You've never been as gentle or kind as Bill, and that's probably why I'm drawn to you." "Yeah, baby, I give you what you want. Now let's get to it before I have to leave." After watching both tapes, I sat in disbelief at their audacity. Not only writing these notes, but leaving them and the tapes where I could find them. My revenge would be thorough and aimed at both of them. I scanned each note onto my hard drive and used advanced software from work to convert the tapes into digital files for editing later. Once finished, I put the notes and tapes in my car's trunk, hiding them under the spare tire. Finally, I tidied up the attic, placing everything back as it was so Marie wouldn't suspect a thing. Over the next 2 weeks, I carefully planned and executed my strategy. Surprisingly, it was easier than I thought to act normal around Marie, pretending as if nothing had happened. I reminded myself that she had deceived me for 6 years, so why should I struggle to do the same? I was sweet and attentive, took care of the kids, showed affection to Marie as before, and even initiated closeness a few times. But I did it subtly so she could easily turn me down. The truth was, I no longer wanted to touch her. An important day for Marie was coming up. She had recently been elected president of the Key Society, a significant local charity, and would be inaugurated at a luncheon where she would present the plans for the upcoming year. Marie had been a board member for 3 years and was proud of being chosen as president. She was anxious about her speech and asked me to help with the PowerPoint presentation she intended to use. This was my perfect opportunity. For a week, we worked on it every evening. She showed me her slides, and I helped organize them into a polished presentation. She practiced it multiple times over the month leading up to her big day, and it always went well. Meanwhile, I made an entirely different PowerPoint presentation and had it ready to replace hers. The night before the event, I deleted her file and replaced it with mine, adding a lock so it couldn't be stopped once it began. The only thing left was to confirm that Harry and his wife were attending. I casually asked her, "Are Harry and Caroline coming?" "Yes," she replied. "They'll be there for the big night." I felt excited, though for different reasons than Marie. We arrived early, and she looked beautiful in her black evening dress. I helped her set up the laptop and ran a quick test to ensure it would play. We enjoyed dinner and listened to the opening remarks. Then, Marie was introduced warmly by the outgoing president, and she stepped up to the podium looking both nervous and proud. As applause died down, she began her speech and launched the PowerPoint file. At first, everything went as expected, with photos of the Society's major projects and charts displaying finances. Then, as planned, it shifted. A series of still images from the videos appeared, frames showing Marie and Harry in compromising positions. Some were dark, but the 10 or 12 frames made it clear who they were. Marie kept speaking for a moment, then noticed the murmuring in the audience. She turned to look at the screen and gasped, knocking over a glass of water in shock. She stood frozen, her face turning crimson. Frantically, she pressed buttons, trying to stop the slideshow. The stills transitioned to video clips. "How are you going to stop Bill from finding out I got you pregnant?" Harry's voice echoed. "As long as I let him have sex sometimes. He won't suspect." "Not too much, baby. You're mine," Harry added. The room erupted into noise, laughter, gasps, and chatter. Marie was paralyzed by shock, too stunned to react. Caroline, Harry's wife, sat at the next table, grabbed a vase of flowers, smashed it over Harry's head, and stormed out. Amidst the laughter and chaos, people gradually left the ballroom, casting glances at Marie and whispering to each other. Before long, Marie and I were alone. She stood at the podium, defeated. I sat 10 feet away, grinning as I looked at her. Finally, she met my eyes with an expression of deep sadness. "Bill, how could you do this to me? I thought you loved me." The irony was too much. I burst out laughing and walked out, still chuckling. But no, that's not how it happened. It was a satisfying fantasy, but unrealistic. If the whole town knew Harry was the father of my children, I'd lose them in the divorce. They'd hate being known as Marie's illegitimate children. I needed to be more discreet. I met with a divorce attorney several times to prepare the necessary documents. I created the exact PowerPoint presentation I envisioned, but didn't wait for Marie's big event. Instead, I planned to show it to her 4 weeks before. One evening, when the kids were asleep, I called her into the office. "Honey, I want you to see the draft of the PowerPoint I made for your speech." "Can it wait, Bill?" she asked, exhausted. "I'm really tired today." "No, honey," I said firmly. "I need to know what changes you want, so I have time to make them. Remember, I'm doing this for you in my free time." Reluctantly, she came into the office. I seated her in front of the computer. "Press A when you're ready. The file will run automatically," I said, smiling to myself. I watched her closely. At first, everything seemed normal as she rehearsed her lines with the initial slides about the society's work. Then she gasped, her face going pale when the still images of her and Harry appeared on the screen. She turned to me, her mouth open but unable to speak. I stared at her, expressionless. Then the video clips played, revealing their conversation about Harry being the father of her children and keeping me unaware, followed by more explicit footage. Marie frantically tried to stop the slideshow, but I had locked it. The screen finally went black. The whole scene lasted about 2 minutes. Marie sat slumped in the chair, head down, unable to meet my eyes. I silently relished her torment. Eventually, she spoke, lifting her head to look at me. In that brief time, she looked as though she had aged 20 years. "Bill, I don't... Oh, Bill, I'm so sorry." Tears welled up and spilled down her face. "I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me?" "Forgive you?" I responded coldly. "For what? Let's go through it. Having an affair with Harry Dorner for 6 years? Giving birth to his children and making me believe they were mine? Mocking me behind my back? Denying me closeness at his request? Is that what you want me to forgive?" Her sobs intensified. "Bill, I don't love him. You're the one I love, the only one I've ever loved." I felt a calm, cold rage. I didn't respond aloud, but thought, "No, Marie, that's a lie. You love the life I provide, the security, but you don't love me. No woman who loves her husband acts this way." I sat back, watching her cry, enjoying the sight and saying nothing as she wept for 20 minutes. Finally, she wiped her face and looked at me. "What are you going to do, Bill? Are you going to divorce me?" "No, Marie, I won't," I lied. "I care too much about Katie and Brian, even if they aren't biologically mine. But things are going to be different from now on. First, call Harry and tell him to come here within 15 minutes. She looked terrified. "But I can't. He's at home with his wife and kids. He won't come." I smirked. "Tell him whatever you need to, but make sure he comes. Let him know that if he doesn't, his marriage will end tomorrow." Marie's eyes reflected fear as she looked at me. Without speaking, she turned and went to the kitchen to call Harry. When he arrived, he wore a tense, forced smile, which told me that Marie had already informed him about what happened. "Come into the office, Harry, and have a seat." "You too, Marie. We need to talk," I said. They both sat down, and I began. "Harry, you've been having your fun with Marie for some time now, making me look like a fool. That ends today. Things have changed, and now it's time for you to face the consequences. Harry opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. Sit down, listen, and watch. I played the PowerPoint presentation, and I saw the color drain from Harry's face as he processed the content. The silence that followed was heavy, and I savored it more than they did. Here's how this is going to work, Harry, I continued. You will follow my instructions exactly, or your marriage to Caroline will come to a very public, abrupt end. Nod if you understand. Harry hesitated, a flicker of anger in his eyes, but then he nodded. Good. Now keep your mouth shut. I have several documents for you to sign. You can have your lawyer review them, but you have 48 hours to return them signed. If not, Caroline will get an invitation to a private screening. I handed him the first document. This states that you acknowledge you're the biological father of Katie and Brian and agree to pay child support until they turn 21, along with a lump sum for college expenses. The figures are $10,000 per child annually, plus $100,000 per child at the start of their college years. The money will go into a trust fund I control and will be used as needed for their benefit. Harry jumped up, his face contorted with fury. This is insane, Bill. I'm not... Sit down, Harry, I ordered, pushing him back into his chair. Shut up. You have the money, and we both know it. This is my show now, not yours. Stay quiet. Marie watched me, her expression a mixture of fear and disbelief. She had never seen me like this before. I moved on. The second document is your consent for me to adopt Katie and Brian. Both you and Marie will need to sign it. The third document states that you relinquish all parental rights and agree never to disclose your biological connection to anyone. The final document is a personal admission that you maltreated my wife at work and coerced her into an affair. What? Harry shouted, leaping up again. That's a lie. She was just as willing as I was. Sit down, Harry, I said darkly. Maybe that's true, but Marie will still sign a complaint stating otherwise. This is my condition for not divorcing her. Understood, Marie? I asked, looking at her. She glanced between me and Harry, terrified, and said nothing. Let me make it clear, I continued. I don't plan to use any of these documents unless you fail to meet your obligations to the kids, your kids, or if you ever think of revealing their true paternity. I handed Marie the sexual maltreatment complaint prepared by my lawyer. Sign it, Marie. She looked frightened, but took the pen and signed at the bottom without a word. Now, Harry, we're nearly done for today. I want these signed documents back in my hands within 48 hours. You can deliver them to the house. And just so you know, if you ever entertain any dark thoughts about injuring me, there are multiple copies of your incriminating letters and notes secured. People are instructed to ensure they come to light if anything happens to me. Any questions? I finished, glaring at him with disdain. I took Marie's hand and guided her back into the office, seating her gently. She was visibly shaken, trembling with fear. Marie, it's all right. I would never hurt you physically. You don't need to be afraid, I reassured her. God, Bill, what's happened to you? How could you do this to Harry? She asked, her voice filled with shock. I looked at her, surprised by her question. Do you really not understand, Marie? Don't you see what he did to you and to me? It was cruel and unforgivable. A deep blush spread across her cheeks. Yes, I see that, she said quietly. But you're so angry, it feels like you've lost control. I fell silent for a moment, letting the tension settle before speaking again. Marie, I promised I wouldn't divorce you. But things will never be the same. From this moment on, everything changes. Do you understand? Yes, Bill, she replied, her eyes pleading. I'll do whatever it takes to make up for what I've done. Good, I said firmly. We're going to start with a few conditions. First, you will find a new job within 2 weeks. I will not tolerate you seeing Harry at work any longer, and this should go without saying, but you will have no personal contact with him. No touching, no calls, no emails, nothing. If our marriage is to move forward, it will be on new terms. I won't accept your coldness, mood swings, or indifference. You need to show, through your actions, that you love me and appreciate our marriage. The passion you showed Harry, I want to see that here with me, and I expect to see you in that lingerie I found hidden in the back of your drawer. I held her gaze meaningfully until she dropped her eyes in shame. And when I want us to be intimate, I expect you to be ready, willing, and enthusiastic. If you truly love me, Marie, you have a lot of lost time to make up for. Tears welled up in her eyes as she crossed the room and knelt at my feet, wrapping her arms around my legs and looking up at me earnestly. I love you, Bill, more than I can say. I'll show you, I promise. I looked at her tear-streaked pale face and frightened eyes. Deep inside, there were traces of the love and devotion I once felt for her, but they were overshadowed by the anger at her betrayal. She deserved every consequence coming her way. I feigned a slight softening. Listen, Marie, I said more gently. In 4 weeks, your big dinner is happening. Let's use this time to rebuild, to create something better from what we have left. If all goes well, that dinner will be our chance to celebrate a new chapter. What do you say? She nodded and hugged my legs tighter. Yes, Bill, thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance. I will be the wife you want me to be. I pulled her close and she kissed my face and lips repeatedly, still crying. Give me 10 minutes to freshen up, and then I'll start making things right, she said, standing up and giving a small, hopeful smile. She left, and I leaned back in my chair, smirking as I thought about the next 4 weeks and how she'd be bending over backward to please me. I was slightly amused that she hadn't noticed what I hadn't done. I hadn't asked her about the details of the affair, or how it began. The evening must have been such a shock that she didn't realize it. But I didn't ask because I simply didn't care anymore. I was done with Marie, even if she didn't know it yet. When I entered the bedroom a few minutes later, the bed was neatly made, the lights dimmed, and Marie lay on her side in a revealing red nightgown. Her face was washed, hair brushed, and makeup retouched. She looked as stunning as ever, but there was an anxious expression in her eyes. I noticed a bottle of lube on the nightstand. "Where are you?" she called in a seductive voice that trembled slightly. "Come here." She reached out her arms, and I undressed quickly and embraced her. We started kissing, and her body moved with eager intensity. Whether it was just for show, I didn't care. I found myself able to put my anger aside and indulge in the moment. Her body was beautiful, and her energy was exciting, especially after years of detachment. I lay back and let her take control, which she seemed eager to do. When we were done, she turned off the light and snuggled up to me under the blanket, softly kissing my neck. "Sleep well?" she whispered. As I drifted off to sleep, I looked forward to more of Marie's attention over the next 4 weeks. I thoroughly enjoyed that period as she put all her effort into repairing our marriage. The next morning, she woke me with a bright smile and a loving kiss, asking if I wanted some intimate attention before breakfast. I enjoyed my meal, watching as Marie went above and beyond to get the kids ready for their day. That evening, I came home to a special dinner Marie had found in a cookbook and decided to try. Katie and Brian, who preferred hot dogs and mac and cheese, weren't fans, but I enjoyed it. Marie made sure the kids were bathed and in bed on time so we could have our evening together. The time in the bedroom was even better than the night before. Marie wore another seductive nightgown, and our time together was relaxed and intimate. Her passion, affection, and energy reminded me of our early years. Despite my hidden feelings, it felt like we were a pair of newlyweds. Day after day, Marie's attention didn't falter. She was cheerful in the mornings and wild in the bedroom at night. New lingerie and different positions were now part of our life, and everything seemed like a dream. Except beneath my agreeable facade, I was seething. I no longer trusted her and only pretended to share in her affection. Harry's signed papers arrived in my mailbox within 48 hours, just as I'd requested. I had Marie sign the adoption consent quickly and took it to my lawyer. Within a week, he arranged a private court hearing, and 10 days later, the adoption was official. My lawyer then prepared the divorce documents. One morning at work, I was surprised when Denise Reynolds, a coworker I occasionally collaborated with, stopped by. At 28, she was 5 years younger than me and undeniably attractive. I knew she was divorced and had noticed some of her flirty remarks over time, though I'd never given them much thought beyond admiring her from a distance. I expected her visit to be work-related, but it wasn't. "Bill," she said, "something's different about you lately. Have you been working out? You seem younger or just more vibrant." "Thanks for noticing, Denise," I replied with a smile. Feeling bold, I added, "Actually, it's something else, but I can't get into it here. How about we have lunch together today?" "Sounds good," she said. We picked up lunch from a salad bar and ate at a park table, enjoying the sunshine. "The change you see is probably because my marriage is falling apart," I admitted. She looked surprised. "And that makes you look better? You'll have to explain." I gave her a slightly edited version of the situation. "A couple of weeks ago, I found out my wife had been cheating on me with a coworker for years. I put boundaries in place, and since then, she's been doing everything she can to make up for it. Here's a secret. Marie thinks she can win me back, but I've already decided I'm leaving her soon. I can't stay with someone who betrayed me. In the meantime, she treats me like royalty, and that's probably what you're noticing. Denise looked at me thoughtfully. I'm impressed by how well you're handling all this. When I found out my ex was cheating, I was a mess for months before I felt like myself again. I'm sorry you went through that, I said sincerely. I had no idea. But right now, I'm determined to stay in control of my life, and things are going to unfold on my terms. Taking a chance, I added, one positive thing is that while I'm technically still married, I know I won't be for long, so I don't feel like I have to hold back from appreciating the beautiful woman in front of me. Denise blushed and glanced away before meeting my eyes again. Bill, you caught me off guard. I didn't expect that. Apologies, Denise, but you're stunning, funny, and I've been drawn to you since the day we met. It just wasn't something I could say until now. Would you like to have dinner with me on Saturday? I know a great Italian place by the river. She regarded me seriously. Bill, I like you too, but can I trust you? Is your marriage really over, or is this just a line? I'm sorry, but I've seen situations like this before. Denise, I've always been upfront with you. You know I never crossed any boundaries before. I'm ending things with Marie soon and filing for divorce right after. There's no turning back. But if you need time to think it over, I understand, even though I'll be disappointed. A smile spread across her face. No, Bill. Now that you've put it out there, I'm willing to take a chance. She leaned forward, and we shared a light, tender kiss. It wasn't intense, but it felt like a promise. I left with a smile on my face. Later, when I told Marie I had a date for Saturday, it brought out a sharp edge in me. I made sure she knew I would be out with another woman while she stayed home with the kids. Marie stared at me in disbelief. But Bill, I've been trying so hard to fix our marriage. How can you go out with someone else? It's simple, Marie. You spent 6 years seeing someone behind my back. Lately, you've been making an effort, but that doesn't mean you've earned my trust or loyalty. I need to enjoy myself before we can even begin to even things out. Tears welled up in her eyes. Are you going to sleep with her? No, but I could. That's what you need to accept. If this hurts you, maybe now you'll understand how I felt. With that, I turned and walked out of the room. My first dates with Denise were wonderful, but cautious. We took our time, feeling that what we had was more than just physical attraction. We laughed, shared stories, and got to know each other better. It felt natural, like the early days with Marie, a thought that briefly saddened me, but I pushed it aside. After our third dinner, Denise softly asked outside her apartment, "Would you like to come in?" We both knew what that meant, and I immediately felt drawn to her. Inside, we embraced and kissed with youthful intensity. She pulled back slightly. "I want this, Bill, but I'm nervous. It's been a long time. Please, be gentle." "Of course," I replied, lifting her carefully. "Which way is your bedroom?" Our first time was gentle, relaxed, and tender. It felt more caring than the eager encounters I'd recently had with Marie. Denise was slightly shy and let me take the lead, enjoying every touch and kiss. When we were done, she kissed me and asked if I'd stay the night. I agreed, and we fell asleep holding each other. The next morning, she was a bit shy, and we didn't make love again, but we exchanged warm goodbyes and soft kisses. There were only a few days left before my final move with Marie. I didn't tell Denise my full plan, but assured her I'd be divorced very soon. On Saturday morning, I returned home to find Marie sitting at the kitchen table, quietly crying. Marie's expression told me she knew exactly where I had been. I approached her, feigning more sympathy than I truly felt, and wrapped her in a gentle hug. "I'm sorry, Marie. I know how this must feel," I said softly. She pulled back slightly, her eyes filled with tears. "Bill, it's unbearable. Knowing you were with someone else tears me apart. I've been so selfish all these years. How could I not think about how my affair would hurt you?" Her voice quivered as she whispered, "Thank you for giving me another chance." Marie's big night, and mine, was approaching. Part of me almost regretted what was coming. The last 4 weeks had been filled with passion and sincere effort from Marie. She'd put her heart into showing how much she valued our relationship, and the sex had been amazing. But no matter what she did, my resentment and anger didn't fade. Her betrayal was too deep to forgive. When I searched my feelings, I found only a sliver of love left for her, and even less sympathy for what was about to happen. While helping her perfect her PowerPoint presentation for the event, I also prepared my own version. It removed Harry's identity and the detail of him being the father of the children, but kept the essential content, photos followed by video clips. I set up the laptop so her presentation would play by default, but a simple keystroke combination could switch it to mine. In the days before the dinner, Marie asked cautiously, "Bill, you did delete that awful file, right?" Smiling, I would show her the laptop and say, "Yes, honey, it's gone. Here's your presentation, ready to go with one click." Relief would wash over her, and she would refocus on her speech with renewed confidence. The last few days at home were particularly pleasant. Marie seemed convinced she had won me back and was more relaxed, humming as she moved around the house. Still, the pain she must have felt after my night with Denise seemed to fuel her efforts in the bedroom. Every moment with her felt bittersweet, knowing what was about to happen. The night of the event arrived. Marie looked stunning in a black evening dress with thin straps that showed off her shoulders and neck. I wore a rented tuxedo. We arrived early, rehearsed her presentation twice, and everything seemed in order. I even helped her set her purse under the podium. When she bent down, I keyed in the combination that would activate my version of the presentation if needed. Dinner was pleasant, filled with conversation and a few dry speeches. Finally, the outgoing president introduced Marie, who stood up and walked to the podium, smiling nervously as the room applauded. According to my watch, her confidence lasted exactly 54 seconds until the first still images of her and Harry appeared. She didn't freeze or knock over a water glass as I imagined. Instead, she turned to me with horror and disbelief before trying to stop the presentation. But of course, she couldn't. The video clips began, and their voices filled the room. Marie stood motionless, her face red, as the room erupted in gasps, murmurs, and shouts. Some people laughed, while others called out angrily. Soon the ballroom emptied, leaving her alone on the stage. I sat and watched. Finally, she turned to me, her voice shaking as she said words I had only dreamed of hearing. "Bill, how could you do this to me? I thought you loved me." "Yes, Marie," I said, standing up. "Over the past few weeks, I loved you just as much as you loved me for the last 6 years." I walked to the podium, placed the divorce papers in her hand, and added, "I'm divorcing you. You've been served. If you stay in town, we'll share custody of Katie and Brian. If not, I'll fight for full custody, and you know I'll win." As I reached the door, I heard her scream, "But you said you wouldn't divorce me! You said we could work it out!" I turned back one last time and met her eyes. "Yes, Marie, but after all these years of you lying to me, I lied to myself." With that, I walked out, leaving her to face the consequences of her betrayal. The weeks following that fateful night were a blur of whispers, knowing glances, and cold indifference. My reputation at work remained intact, bolstered by my quiet professionalism, but the same couldn't be said for Marie. I'd heard from mutual friends and through the local grapevine that she'd resigned from her role at the Key Society. The weight of shame had pushed her into a reclusive corner where even the most persistent well-wishers couldn't reach. At home, the silence between us was almost comfortable in its predictability. The kids, innocent as ever, remained unaware of the storm that had engulfed our lives. Katie's drawings were still pinned to the fridge, colorful and chaotic, while Brian's laughter still echoed through the halls. Each sound reminded me that my choices, painful as they were, had preserved their childhood for now. I was their father in all the ways that mattered, and that was enough. One evening, a few weeks after the gala, I was sitting on the couch, staring at the flickering images on the television without really seeing them. Marie walked in, her eyes red-rimmed and her steps tentative. She clutched a small, battered notebook in her hands, a remnant of our earlier days. Without a word, she sat beside me, the space between us charged with years of unspoken grief. "I've been reading through this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I glanced at the notebook and recognized it immediately. It was filled with notes, plans, and dreams we'd made when life was simpler, our love untested. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "I don't expect forgiveness," she added, her fingers tracing the edges of the worn cover. "But I need you to know that even at my worst, part of me always wanted to come back to this, to us." Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret and the echoes of a life that could have been. I took a deep breath, leaning forward to rest my elbows on my knees. "You know, Marie, it's not just about forgiveness. It's about trust. I don't think I can ever give that back to you. Not the way I once did." My words were calm, detached, as if they belonged to someone else. The raw edges of my anger had dulled, replaced by a cool, hollow acceptance. "I know," she said, tears sliding silently down her cheeks, "but I will spend the rest of my life trying to prove that I deserve whatever piece of you is left." She reached out, fingers brushing my arm, tentative and trembling. For a moment, I let the touch linger. It was familiar yet foreign, filled with the memories of better times and the reality of our now shattered life. Marie, for Katie and Brian, I'll always be here. But for us, I paused, searching for the right words. We're standing in the ruins of what we built, and I don't think either of us knows how to rebuild. She nodded, understanding etched in her expression. We sat in silence as the night deepened, shadows stretching across the room like silent witnesses to our broken vows. In the months that followed, our interactions became almost transactional. We co-parented with a strained politeness, conversations about school projects and birthday parties serving as placeholders for the closeness we once shared. I found a new rhythm, one where Denise's laughter became a part of my days and nights. She brought a warmth that was uncomplicated, a comfort that didn't come with the weight of betrayal. But as much as I tried to move forward, the past clung to me. I'd sometimes catch Marie watching the kids, her eyes softening in those moments when they were too caught up in their games to notice her. There was a sadness there, a realization that she'd gambled and lost more than just a marriage. She'd lost a part of herself that she'd never reclaim. One evening, while the kids were at a sleepover, Marie and I sat across the dining table, the silence no longer harsh but resigned. "Bill," she said, breaking the stillness, "I'm thinking of moving, somewhere nearby so I can still be a part of their lives, but far enough that we're not constantly reminded." I nodded, the idea of space a welcome one. "That might be for the best," I replied. The truth was, I needed room too. Room to breathe, to heal, and to finally let go of what we'd both held onto for far too long. Our divorce was finalized a month later, quiet and free of spectacle. Marie left with dignity, carrying only the essentials and the echoes of our life together. The house felt emptier but also lighter, as if the ghosts of our mistakes had finally found their release. Denise moved in gradually, her presence seeping into the cracks of the house and filling it with new stories, new laughter. She brought with her a hope I hadn't realized I was missing. Yet, amid the fresh starts and new memories, there was a part of me that still glanced back, not out of longing, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. Years later, as I watched Katie and Brian race across the lawn, their laughter blending with Denise's, I felt a rare peace settle within me. The journey had been brutal, marked by betrayal, anger, and heartbreak. But standing there, with the sun casting long, golden rays across the yard, I finally felt the echoes of acceptance. The past was behind me, not forgotten, but understood. And as I pulled Denise close, her smile mirroring the lightness I felt, I realized that the life we'd started to build was not just a continuation. It was a rebirth, one I was grateful for every single day.
Story 4.
My girlfriend cheated with her female friend, so I played with her mind before dumping her. I, 26 male, have been dating my girlfriend 24 female for 5 years now, and we've had a great relationship. If I'm allowed to say so myself, I think I've been excellent to her in all the ways that I can be, and she's been pretty good to me too, before what I'm about to narrate. Our years of dating have been quite conflict-free for the most part. Let me cut to the chase. My girlfriend, let's call her Sadie, to make the story easier to tell, has a friend from college called Lucy. They weren't roommates or classmates, but they met while watching a volleyball or basketball match, or something, I can't recall exactly. From there, they became good friends and would hang out occasionally, even post-college. I think they see each other about once or twice a year. So yeah, they're good friends. I've never felt any kind of way about their relationship because it just seemed like two great female friends, or girlfriends, as they call each other. So when Sadie said that Lucy would be in town and she wanted to go crash at her hotel for a night, I didn't think much of it. This wasn't the first time they'd made an arrangement like this. However, for clarity, the first time I did find it odd because our apartment has an extra room, and Lucy could just come to our place. But it made sense when she said that Lucy wouldn't feel as free to do as she could if she had a hotel room. I didn't make it a problem. When the day came, I was happy having the house to myself. I could eat whatever I wanted, watch whatever I wanted, and freeball it, so not a bad trade-off. I had as much fun as I could that day, and Sadie came back the next morning. She seemed to be in a good mood as far as I could tell, and considering she had just had a good time with her friend, that was normal. However, the part that got me was that she asked me, "Is everything all right?" This was a question that she had asked before, but the only time she'd ask it was when my mood was clearly off for whatever reason. And I had a good time by myself, so it didn't really make sense to me. It did make me a bit curious, though. I wouldn't quite say suspicious. I let it go, though. We've got to skip forward now. I was chilling with a pal of mine about 2 weeks later, and he started up on some theory he had that all straight women were bisexual to some degree. It sounded pretty funny to me, but he seemed really insistent on making his point. I can't remember exactly everything he said, but he talked about how they liked seeing each other naked and touching each other playfully in certain spots. I mean, this guy was more of a ladies' man than myself, but it still sounded ridiculous for the most part. By the way, I'd actually love to hear what you all think about his theory in the comments. He'll probably be happy to hear if people agree with him. He can be quite a fool half the time, so it was hard to tell how serious he was about this theory of his. I eventually headed back home, not necessarily convinced of what he had been talking about, but I will admit that it started to make me think. If Sadie and Lucy found themselves in a charged situation, would they stop each other, or would at least one of them stop? Would my girlfriend even consider it to be cheating? They met in college, and that's when women tend to experiment the most. So would I know if they ever experimented with each other back then, or experimented at all? I was a bit annoyed at my friend because I became a little fixated on finding an answer. I guess I was starting to have a little bit of doubt about the relationship between the two. That fixation made me a little more talkative the next day, and I asked her about some experimentation in college. She talked about trying weed and some other light drugs, her words, not mine, but the habits never really stuck. I decided to take the conversation where I wanted it to go, and asked her whether she ever experimented with women. Her reaction seemed exaggerated to me, with a lot of laughing and head shaking, and saying no over and over. It did not make me feel better, because I seriously doubted whether she was telling the truth right then. I tried to press a little bit more, but it seemed close to turning into an issue, so I let it go. At this point, I kind of wish I hadn't followed through with the questioning because I actually didn't believe a word she said now. I feel like she and Lucy either have something going on or they've had something in the past. The past is the past, but it would feel a lot better to have had that stated from the very start if that's the case. I think everyone might agree that someone you've slept with always has a better chance of going again than the general population, so it'd be nice if I had a good idea of this from the very beginning. To cut to the chase, I feel like there might have been something between the two of them, but I can't tell whether it was just a thing of the past or new. I'd really love to know what you all think, though. I want to check her phone, but I'm scared of getting caught because that will seriously hurt trust between us. Edit 1, I saw a few comments saying that I'd be surprised by the number of women who are open to testing out the other side of the fence, so maybe my friend was right. However, it's still really hard for me to see my girlfriend in that way. She's never given me a hunch that she's experimented to that degree, even before I actually asked. I know it sounds like I'm making excuses for her, though. Edit 2, alright, I think you all made it clear that she simply won't tell me even if I ask her directly. So the only way I'm going to get an answer is by finding it myself. I'll look for an opportunity to comfortably find the answers, but I also acknowledge that not seeing anything that shows what she was up to doesn't necessarily mean she wasn't up to anything. Anyhow, once I do, I'll be sure to bring an update for all of you. Edit 3. And just to clarify, even though I never imagined it would be necessary, I'm not demonizing lesbian relationships here, as some of you are claiming. If my girlfriend experimented in college, it makes no difference to me. I just don't think I like the idea of thinking I have a straight partner and finding out they're cheating on me and simultaneously swinging the other way. I know there's the whole fresh around girl-on-girl action, but it doesn't make potential cheating any softer. It's understandable to wonder about these things, especially after she had a bit of an exaggerated response. After all, it's not every day your significant other has sleepovers with someone from their past while you're left to binge-watch Netflix alone. Maybe Lucy is just the designated friend for when Sadie needs to vent about you leaving the toilet seat up for the 100th time. Or perhaps they're secretly plotting world domination through a volleyball league. Who knows? And as far as your pal's theory about all straight women being closeted bisexuals? Well, that's about as scientifically sound as saying all men secretly dream of the Roman Empire. In the end, though, if you're really itching for answers, maybe just be straight up with her. Just remember, curiosity killed the cat, and in this case, it might just put a dent in your relationship too. Update 2. So here's the update that a lot of you have been waiting for. Lucy hasn't been back in town since my first post, and things between me and my girlfriend are cruising along the way they always do. Though my suspicions do occasionally pop up now and then, and I don't like it when they do. So, I made a pretty strong mental note to check her phone or laptop when I had a solid chance to. That opportunity finally came for me a handful of weeks after my first post, and it's been about a week since then. I was lucky enough for there to be a day when my girlfriend went out to the spa, and she was very clearly in a rush to leave the house because she was late for her spa appointment. We used the same model of phone, so I put mine on the table beside her handbag because I know she'd assume it was hers in the haste. We used somewhat different cases. Hers is navy blue, and mine is black, but just as I hoped, she just grabbed the phone without looking at it closely and headed out the door. I heard her car start up, and she left. It was about 20 minutes later that her phone started ringing, and I saw she was calling me from my number. She told me she had taken my phone by accident and asked me not to be mad. There was the option for me to come over with her phone if I needed it that badly, but I told her there was no big deal. I had no issues over her having my phone because I've been faithful, and there's really nothing incriminating beyond my group chat with the boys and the nonsense. We say all the time, it was a worthy trade-off. She's an extremely light sleeper, so I knew I couldn't check her phone while she was sleeping. When I was sure that she wouldn't be coming back home for her phone, I went straight in. The first place I went was the gallery app, and I scrolled back to the date when she had gone to the hotel with Lucy. There was nothing there beyond videos of them at the bar drinking, and then some videos of them goofing off at her hotel. I even checked the trash bin, though any evidence that was there would have been gone by now. I went into her messages app after that and found Lucy's chat there. Initially, I read through the most recent messages, but when I didn't see anything to raise my eyebrows, I scrolled up until I got to the days after the hotel stay. And that's when I found exactly what I really didn't want to find. The conversation went something like this, Lucy. Sadie, I think we should talk about, well, you know. Sadie, what? Lucy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's leave the jokes for now. Sadie, sorry, it was certainly exciting. Lucy, yeah, it was very exciting. I'm sorry if I crossed a line, but when you didn't turn me away, I couldn't stop. I've never been with a girl before, you know that. Sadie, I wanted to stop you, but I think it felt so good from the very start that I couldn't, and I'm glad I didn't. Lucy, I'm glad you didn't too. Sadie, I don't know if this can be a thing between us. You have a serious boyfriend. Sadie, he doesn't need to know. I almost threw the wall at the phone when I read that part. He doesn't need to know. Well, Sadie, sorry to burst your bubble, but secrets have a funny way of crawling out from under the rug. Now, I get it. You're pacing like a caged tiger, trying to figure out your next move. Punching through drywall might seem like a cathartic release, but trust me, it won't solve anything except maybe giving you a sore hand. Whatever you do, just remember to keep your cool. No rash decisions, no impromptu confessions. You're playing the long game now, and revenge is best served cold. Update 3. This is going to be the last update, hopefully, because I've got my get back, and it was incredibly satisfying to me. A little bit of me feels like I might have been too villainous. Here's some background that I don't recall giving in the previous part. Sadie and I shared an apartment, but it was originally her place. I moved in with her at the 2-year mark, and we started splitting the rent, but it was never my apartment officially. I also ended up telling one of my good friends about the whole situation, and he was able to give some good advice in the form of 2 words: leave her. He also said I could crash at his place in the meantime. I knew I was going to leave her, but I just wanted to do it in a way that would make me feel very satisfied. Conveniently for me, she mentioned how she wanted to go and see her mom or sisters over the few days that she had free from work, and I supported her through the entire thing. When the house was left to me, I began to pack all of the things that belonged to me. It was a very long process since I had been living there for 3 straight years. But I was able to get everything packed up before midnight, and I let a friend of mine who had a pickup truck know that I'd need his help transporting some things. The next day came, and even though it took several trips, we got everything loaded up in his car. I left the key I had with a trusted neighbor, and I took off. I kept chatting with Sadie as if everything was normal until the day she was supposed to get back, and then I went completely AWOL. At this point, she started calling me over and over, and that was when I assumed she got back home. She started to send panicked text messages, but I refused to answer a single one. In the end, I went out with my buddy to get my mind off things and left my phone at home since it was being such a huge distraction. Like I said, part of me feels really bad about what I'm doing. She's not the first person to find themselves ghosted and not understand why. But the exact reason I chose this approach is that I know it will mess with her mind more than most people. Am I a bad person? I guess so, but I'm only doing this because she cheated on me. If she's ever going to go into the world and be in a relationship with anyone else, I'd like her to remember this feeling. If she wants to cheat, with a man or with a woman, it doesn't matter. My pal George called me to say that Sadie had come to his house looking for me, but he had no idea what was going on, which was better for me. He wouldn't have said something even if he did know. I gave him a summary of the whole thing, and he was in support of me. So when she came back to his place 2 days later, he told her he still knew nothing. The calls and messages didn't stop, and at a point I started getting them from her parents and her sister. I think I must have gotten well over 200 missed calls by the time I decided I had had enough. It had been almost 2 weeks since she hadn't heard from me, and being interrupted by a phone call every hour was getting on my nerves, so I decided it was time for me to finally get back to Sadie. I took a drive over to her apartment and knocked on the door. I could tell when she got through the door and looked through the peephole. She opened the door in a flash and jumped into a hug, but I pushed her off me. We went inside, and the place was a relative mess, even after I had freed up so much space by taking my own stuff out of there. I could see that she had been drinking too. She generally looked a mess. "What did I do?" was the first thing that she said, and I remember laughing at that question because I knew that she knew. She had enough time to think through every wrong thing she had done in the relationship. If she was really faithful for as long as I thought, then only one thing would pop up in her mind. So I told her that she knows what she did. "Lucy," she said, and I just laughed again. She took that as confirmation and just sank to the ground, sobbing. I knew she had put all the pieces together, and she realized there was nothing she could say. "I can't live without you, I'm dying without you, you're hurting me so much," she said. All that in between a lot of sniffling and sobbing and wailing. I had 1,000 things to say in response to that, but she was such a pitiful mess that I just turned around and walked out. I could hear her crying my name behind me, but I left her there. I wasn't even going to entertain her with a response because she knew what she was doing when she did it. As soon as I got back to my friend's place, I grabbed the pictures I had taken of her messages with Lucy and sent them straight to her parents and her sister. If they were going to involve themselves, then I was sure they were going to love getting the full update on things. I never got a response from any of them, but I knew they all read what I sent. For fun, I sent it to Lucy too over Facebook. Her response came in quickly, and all she did was apologize and apologize. I really wish I had a way to get at her too, but there was nothing I could do beyond making her feel guilty. She knew I was in the picture back then, and it had made her feel bad, and hopefully knowing that she was the reason for a 5-year relationship going down the drain would make her feel like crap even more. So, it's been a week since I went over to Sadie's apartment, and she's been texting me every day, telling me about how me not saying anything to her is driving her crazy, how I'm causing her so much pain, and how she just needs closure from me. I don't want her to actually snap, but I want her to hurt even more than I did. My mental state wasn't great when she cheated, and I'm not about to coddle her when it's time for the consequences of her actions. I still feel a little villainous for targeting her anxiety, but should I? She didn't offer me the same consideration. So I'm trying to embrace the path I chose a lot better. That's it between us, though. I don't think I'm ever going to answer a message or call from her again, and she's simply going to have to deal with that. Meanwhile, I'll focus on getting my life together and maybe finding someone I can trust. We'll see. I've got to hand it to you, OP. You played the disappearing act like a seasoned magician. Poof! And just like that, you vanished into thin air, leaving Sadie drowning in a sea of unanswered calls and unanswered questions. Sending those incriminating screenshots to her family and Lucy, talk about adding insult to injury. I bet Sadie's mom choked on her afternoon tea when she saw those messages. And as for Lucy, well, she'll probably rethink her life choices faster than you. Can say exposed. But hey, you're not a villain. You're just serving up a cold dish of reality. Sadie played with fire, and now she's feeling the burn. And as for her incessant texts and cries for closure, sounds like someone's feeling the sting of their own deceit. So go ahead, buddy. Focus on rebuilding your life. Find someone who won't leave you questioning every late-night text or suspicious spa day. And as for Sadie, well, let's just say she's learning the hard way that cheating comes with consequences, and they're not always pretty. What would you have done? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time,